pride flag. And so even the background being black lends to the ancestors that we've lost, folks that have started this fight, the Marsha P. Johnsons, the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings, all of those folks that started this work. All we're doing is continuing what that looks like.
This All Black Lives Matter treatment of Hollywood Boulevard is just a way to commemorate the history that was made recently. And as I told Lucky, who designed this graphic, this is where we meet the moment, you know? So this is very exciting.
We get to do something for a good cause. And to be able, normally we do streets, so to be able to do something that's actually going to make a difference is really important to us.
We need to make sure that everybody is being treated equally and that we all live in love and peace, and I think that this message over here helps with that.
No matter who you are, where you're from, or what your beliefs are, or what your gender identity is, we're all equal. And to think that we can spread that message from Hollywood, California, and amplify it, it's going to help in the cause.
Governor Newsom extends the eviction moratorium, El Grito goes virtual, and the Staples Center becomes a voting site. These stories up next on City Beat.
Good news for California renters. Those who haven't been able to pay rent from March 1st through August 31st due to COVID-19 will not be evicted. This reprieve is thanks to a new bill signed by Governor Gavin Newsom. This bill also prevents evictions of those tenants through January 31st as long as they pay 25% of their rent throughout that time. This opportunity allows California residents a sigh of relief as the very real threat of homelessness still looms heavily due to the pandemic and the slow reopening of the state. El Grito is the holiday that marks the beginning of the Mexican War of Independence. And like most everything else, celebrating El Grito will be different for 2020. A pre-recording of the event took place on Alvarez Street with folk dancers and musicians as part of the El Grito Telethon. Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez was there conducting interviews. El Grito, known as El Grito de Dolores, began September 16, 1810, when Father Miguel Hidalgo called on the people of the parish in the Mexican town of Dolores to rise up against colonial rule. El Grito is celebrated on September 15th, the night before Mexican Independence Day. Starting October 30th through Election Day, November 3rd, residents will be able to cast their votes at the famed Staples Center in downtown LA. The arena will also serve as a drop-off point for anyone wishing to safely leave their ballots in a box. The designation of the Staples Center as an official polling site is part of the agreement between the Players Union and the league for the end of the boycott of the playoff games by the NBA players. The agreement requires the city of every NBA team to use their arena as a voting location.
LA 2050 is a community-guided initiative driving and tracking progress toward a shared vision for the future of Los Angeles. And one of this year's winners leads a co-op whose mission is about growing food in, by, and for its community.
I was raised as an Air Force brat all across the world. I graduated from high school in New Mexico. I went to college in Chicago, lived in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, New York City, and now here I'm leading Crop Swap LA. So my life's been fortunate in having a variety of experiences and exposure to different kinds of people, different foods. When I found out I was becoming a father, I panicked. What am I gonna feed this kid? I decided I'm going to build a garden and make the best food possible, and that'll be a practice that she'll grow into. Crop Swap LA is really about connecting people and food. So what we're doing is we're taking over front yards, empty lots, sometimes rooftops, to grow food where there isn't food growing already, and make nutrient-grown, locally sourced food available to everyone. So this is the compost pile where my family and I drop all of our food scraps from the kitchen. It's important to keep it turned, and it's important to keep it wet, so I've got irrigation spraying it every day twice. And if you do it right, you'll see there's a lot of life in there. Those worms are designed to keep your soil happy. They eat and they poop, and when they're done, your soil is happy. Over 100 gardeners got involved in the first 6 months. All you need is manure and some kind of hay or mulch, and then you can grow exactly where you are. So we were just awarded the LA 2050 grant for $50,000. What we're planning to do is take 7 front yards and convert them into gardens that are highly productive and put food directly into the local zip codes that they're grown in. We're also selling on the CropSwap app. If you haven't downloaded, it's a really effective way to swap and share and send and sell food that it's growing on your property anyway. The real best place is to follow Instagram. We're LA CropSwap on Instagram, and I'm Black Superdad on Instagram.
Organizations across the Southland have been providing meals and badly needed supplies to underserved communities as far back as January, and that need shows no sign of letting up. So neighborhood nonprofits are stepping up. In the Valley, the Department on Disabilities distributes meals to seniors, and on the west side, Venice Family Clinics load every care package with healthy eats. Take a look.
Today's event is a free food market. We know that there's patients who have food insecurities, and so what we want to do is that we want to be able to assist them. We really want to treat food as medicine, and the Venice Family Clinic, we've been providing free food markets now since January.
Just being able to wake up in the morning and not have any fear about food security or food stability is such a privilege that I recognize a lot of people in the greater LA community don't have.
Es demasiada ayuda para nosotros. Todos los servicios que tienen nos ayudan demasiado, especialmente ahora que más se necesita. Es de mucha ayuda porque así con eso tenemos un gasto menos en casa.
Es una despensa saludable, con verduras frescas, muy saludable para toda la gente que quiera venir a agarrar su despensa.
The way that we've adapted the free food market to the pandemic is that we've changed the way that we do things. When we first started our free food market back in January, pre-COVID, the patients were allowed to pick what they wanted, farmer market style. Now what we're doing is that, as you can see, we're pre-packaging our bags so that we can keep the touch very little and very minimal.
The Venice Family Clinic, we do our best to just show them that we're there for support, at least to give them free food as much as possible and our support and care. And one major theme that I've seen with Venice Family Clinic is just overwhelming compassion and understanding.
Today we are distributing personal protective equipment for families with developmental disabilities in the Los Angeles area.
People with disabilities are at high risk already, and it's very important that if they are going to be exposed to the elements and going out to grocery stores or any other events or just walking around the block, right, to get some fresh air, that they are covered with what is required by the city in order to not only not expose others, but also to not expose themselves.
It's important for us to be here today to make sure we bring awareness to Latino families specifically who may not have the means to come by personal protective equipment so that they can be able to acquire it and make sure that they protect themselves.
¿Qué clase de ayuda busca usted aquí?
Pues ahorita ya lo que fuera, lo necesario, algo como para protegernos de aquí, de la enfermedad y por lo que fuera,
Pues por lo regular creo que hay mucha diferencia a veces entre los recursos que familias latinas pueden recibir, así que es un orgullo para nosotros poder ofrecer este mismo equipo a personas latinas y aún más personas con discapacidades de desarrollo que, por cierto, aún a veces tienen menos recursos, así que es un placer poder pues cerrar este espacio que hay entre los recursos que necesitan.
Who doesn't love movies? When it comes to big screen entertainment, it looks like drive-ins are the order of the day. And in Culver City, one of the biggest studios in the business is opening their film library and their studio lot for the cinephiles who act fast and grab tickets while they last. And they are calling it the Sony Pictures Drive-In Experience. Get a load of this operation.
We are at the Sony Pictures Drive-In Experience. We all love movies so much. We make them here and we love going to see them in movie theaters all around the country, and we haven't been able to do that for the past 5 months. And it's so nice to be able to put up these amazing LCD screens and come together as a community to see movies again.
We're here to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm very excited being here.
Very fitting to be on a Hollywood studio to see a movie about movie making and Hollywood.
I think it's awesome. I'm a filmmaker myself. I'm a huge movie fan, and to be on a lot with such a legacy is really cool.
I've never been to a drive-in.
I think it's a lot of fun. I've always loved drive-ins since I was a kid. I wish I could go back to the 60s.
Our opening weekend film, one of them was Karate Kid, and if you remember that movie, at the end is a big fight scene. At the culmination of the fight scene, the entire audience erupted in cheers, and it just brought tears to my eyes of like that community feel, that family vibe, and just having fun as a group again in a safe way. We're being incredibly COVID safe. We have a limited number of cars. People have to remain in their cars for the entire time. They may use the restrooms, but you have to wear a mask.
It feels very safe. They were very organized. They were very precise about precautions and everything.
I'm very happy that we can come and see movies again in this day and age because of the virus, and I think this is a very great way of going to see movies together from cars now. It's awesome.
Wear the mask, keep apart, and come out.
Right now we're set to end the Monday after Labor Day, but we are trying to figure out if we can extend. We would love for everyone to come and experience the Sony Pictures Drive-In on the historic Sony Pictures lot.
Something like 7,000 Mexican Americans had died in Vietnam, and the boxes, aluminum boxes, were coming back to East LA, and we're saying, what's going on? Why are so many of us dying in Vietnam? And so we wanted to bring a stop to that, but also we wanted to bring a stop to the police brutality in East Los Angeles, and that's why we got involved to demonstrate, to voice our opinion. The demonstration is a poor man's press to express our grievances. And the moratorium itself on August 29, 1970, I would say to some degree was a showdown between the police and the community, because the police came and they tried to clear the park. They came in hitting people on the head, arresting people. I think 500 people were arrested. The people had no choice but to fight back. Turned into one riot, turned into 3 more riots, and it just continued on to this point where Ruben Salazar stopped here at the Silver Dollar at this location, and he was shot in the head by a tear gas projectile, which killed him.
So, I mean, we went from exuberance and excitement and, great unity and pride to then being attacked and being, fearful, scared, being, extremely conscious about things that were going on around us, watching the police, club people, looking at the tear gas, grenades, and trying to avoid them, trying to move people around so that they could be safe. And it was, it was chaotic. And, at some point, they overwhelmed the park, and I took off running right down the street. And then a car just pulled up on me and my friends. And fortunately, I was a pretty good athlete then, and I was able to just scale the fence and run into a house where people were opening up their doors for people to come in. And they served us, water and coffee and chocolate, and they shared their food with us. And everybody was talking about the Chicano movement and police brutality and all these things. And, mostly I listened. because I was young and I was learning. And then when things calmed down, I started walking home. And then, of course, my father came and admonished me, I'll say. and only the way that a former boxer and a paratrooper could do, admonished me for not being careful. These protesters and dreamers are going to be the future political, social, and cultural leaders of our community. So let's understand that and embrace that and applaud that. But remember, you're trying to make change and influence people. And that's not easy. That's a lifelong endeavor for many of us. And so be constructive, be positive, and be safe.
Go online for Latina Empowerment Day. Do carry out for Dine LA, Italy, Los Angeles, yum, or adopt a kitten via drive-thru. All this and more next on Virtual Things to Do.
Mark your calendars, Los Angeles. Dine LA is back this September 1st through the 18th. Head to their rooftop restaurant for incredible views alongside wood-fired dishes. Staying in? Get a taste of Italy at home. Whether you are dining indoors or ordering in, Italy LA has got you covered with specialty Dine LA menus for over 2 weeks straight. Don't miss Dine LA Italy Los Angeles. The event begins September 1st and runs through the 18th. Italy Los Angeles is located at 10250 Santa Monica Boulevard. For more information, visit Italy.com. Latina Empowerment Day 2020 is here. Join Hispanis Organized for Political Equality, HOPE, for a regional virtual event series. They'll address local COVID-19 economic and health updates, prepare for a secure financial future through retirement savings, and learn how leadership today can make an impact today by serving on California's boards and commissions. This session is free and open to all, but registration is required. Latina Empowerment Day will begin its regional online events beginning September 10th. For details, visit events-latinas.org. Join Best Friends Animal Society September 13th for a brand new COVID-19 style adoption event. Adopt a kitten from your car. Stay socially distant from the safety of your car while viewing their available kittens. Then complete the adoption process from one of their reserved parking spots. Take your kitten home the same day. They even have pre-packaged kitten start kits for purchase. Please sign up in advance. Walkthroughs are welcome. Masks required. The Best Friends Animal Society Kitten Drive-Thru Adoption event happens September 13th. For more information, check out their listing on Eventbrite. And that's a look at some virtual things to do.
That's it for this edition. I'm Rasha Goel. From all of us here at LA This Week, thanks for joining us. And a reminder that you can catch us online at lacityview.org. Don't forget, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next time for more LA This Week.
Good morning and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Wednesday, September 9th. I am Nuri Martinez, the President of the City Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Bonin.
Bonin present.
Buscaino.
Present.
Cedillo. Councilmember Cedillo. Harris Dawson.
Here.
Koretz. Krikorian.
Here.
Lee.
Present.
Martinez.
Present.
O'Farrell.
Present. Excellent.
Price.
Present.
Rodriguez. Rodriguez. Rue.
Present.
Wesson.
Wesson here.
And one more time, Councilmember Cedillo. Koretz. Rodriguez. 11 members and a quorum, Madam President.
Cedillo here.
Thank you. 12 members present, Madam President.
First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Cedillo moves and Mr. Bonin seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Buscaino moves and Mr. Harris Dawson seconds. Next.
Madam President, would council like all items to go forthwith today?
Without objection, that will be the order. Next.
There has been a request to receive and file item 16 inasmuch as the item was scheduled in error.
Without objection.
Thank you. Items 1 through 23 are items for which public hearings have been held. Items 24 and 25 are items for which public hearings have not been held. Item 26 is an item scheduled for closed session. And on the continuation agenda, item 27 is an item for which public hearing has been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, without objection, those items are now before us. Members, do you wish to call any of these items specials, Mr. Bonin?
Yes, Madam President. I'd like to call 24 special for questions and 23 special for questions and a potential amendment to replace the $30 million figure under recommendation 8 with $97 million.
Yeah, Mr. Bonin, I'm introducing a special that addresses that very amendment that you're introducing.
Okay, I just want to make sure
motion
mine is in there in case it winds up being different. The other would be to amend recommendation 16 to instruct the GM of HSID to execute the contracts with LASA for the Emergency Solutions Grant COVID funding. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any others? Members, are there any other specials? Okay, I'd like to call also item 23 special for a substitute motion, and it will be circulated by staff shortly. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. We're going to go ahead and vote on items that have not been called special and that have held public comment in committee. So, Madam Clerk, which items are those?
That would be for items 1 through 22.
Okay, go ahead and please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz. Krikorian. Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rodriguez. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Okay.
Rue.
Yes.
Wesson.
Yes.
And back to the
Krikorian,
top.
aye.
Hold on for just a second. We can't hear Ms. Rodriguez, and for the record, we've been joined by her and Mr. Koretz, Madam Clerk.
Then on this item, Councilmember Koretz, your vote.
They might not be able to hear us.
Councilmember Krikorian.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Can we try Mr. Koretz one more time?
Councilmember Koretz.
12 ayes, these items are approved.
Hi, sorry, my audio was down.
Councilmember Rodriguez, would you like to add your vote to these items?
Please.
And the vote is?
13 ayes.
Thank you.
Mr. Buscaino?
Madam President, we just approved a reappointment for Commissioner Hooper to serve on the Housing Authority Board, and I want to thank her for continuous service, a resident at Nickerson Gardens, and I want to recognize her and her service. Thank you for the unanimous support of her reappointment. And secondly, I am coming at you here live on KNX 1070, 100 years of service, and I'll be making a presentation at the conclusion of today's meeting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Madam Clerk, we're going to go ahead and begin public comment. Go ahead and inform our callers of the call-in information.
Thank you, Madam President. And as indicated on the agenda, members of the public wishing to offer public comment should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. And again, call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak.
Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Madam President. To members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute to speak per item, up to 3 minutes total, including 1 minute for general public comment if you wish. We'll tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. And if you're not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on topic, you'll get one brief warning from me or the President. If you don't immediately get clearly on topic or again stray off topic, the President will cut you off and you will forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We're going to take 30 minutes total public comment. We have already voted on items 1 through 22, so it's only 23 and on that are open for public comment. Finally, to members of the public dialing in to speak, please understand Zoom reconfigures its settings a little bit, and we can't remove everybody from the waiting room into the meeting muted at once, so we're taking you one at a time unmuted. I know this is somewhat inconvenient because to hear what's going on in the meeting, you'll probably be listening on your computer or on another device. Please keep one ear on for somebody addressing you. As soon as you hear anyone, that means you're live. Be person ready to speak in the council meeting. Immediately turn off or turn down the volume on your other devices because there's a time delay. If you listen on your other devices to hear somebody address you, the meeting is going to go off kilter because of the delay. So we're doing the best that we can, and we appreciate your understanding with this. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Mr. Koretz? I believe you have an amending motion on item 27, which was continued at your request from yesterday's meeting. I want to make sure we introduce that amending motion before we take public comment. Give us just a second. We're trying to get a hold of Mr. Koretz. Mr. Koretz? Mr. Koretz, can you hear us?
Thank you for calling. Please leave a message.
Mr. Koretz, we're going to you for your amending motion on item 27. Members, it seems like Mr. Koretz is having audio problems, so let's give him another minute.
Madam President, my audio problems, I think, are cleared up.
All right, thank goodness, Mr. Koretz.
Thank
Okay,
you.
why don't we go ahead and go to you for your amending motion on item 27, which you asked to be continued from yesterday's meeting?
Yes, thank you. I'd
Go ahead.
like to amend item 27 on today's council agenda to remove the Melrose Avenue Active Transportation Project from the Active Transportation Program, parentheses ATP, dash cycle 5 call for projects.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Okay, let's go ahead and take the first caller. Can you repeat, Mr. City Attorney, which items we're taking public comment for?
Yes, Madam President, it's items 23 through 27 only.
Let's go ahead and take the first caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 7719, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
What items would you like to speak on?
Can you hear me? It's Eric
Yes.
Previn.
Hi, Mr. Previn. What items do you want to speak on?
Okay, I'd like to speak on all of the available items and
Okay.
the general public comment.
23 to 27 are the items available to speak on. You have 3 minutes, and you have your 1 minute of general public comment. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, obviously, I'll start with something that begins with a 23. 23 is it's like you must have amended it because it's in the section marked you can't speak on it. And it really impacts CD2, where I live, because you've got additional beds, 275 at 2 separate sites in CD2 and 250 in CD3 and 15. But here's the interesting thing. The cost per room for this kind of temporary housing related to COVID setup is only around $42,000 on average, but it's $48,000 for the CD2 properties, and it's $34,000 for the other properties. So that's a big discrepancy that gets the average to 42. And I'm highly interested in these kinds of operations. And I also note that we have all sorts of helpers from the United Way and a community of friends. And there's a real feeling in the districts that some of these helpful groups have been around for a very long time. And for example, Dora Leong Gallo, who came right out of Margaret Lee Thomas's office, is out there touting, there's been an article in the paper also about the excessive cost of these units. Some are as high as $750,000. We're in the exciting pallet place where we're talking about in the 40s, but even that has caused people to go, why is it so much money? Today, at this item 23, we have $22 million being pushed out the door. I just think that, we also have a report from you, Councilmember Martinez, to look at the Permanent Supportive Housing and what LASA has been up to. Once again, hashtag everyone out. Really, we've been in such a free fall that whatever is going on, this is not to impugn anybody's motives, it's not working. And in item 26, you've got the LA Alliance lawsuit, which is sort of the third ring of the three-ring circus, where you have Judge Carter, who is diligent at banging his desk, but you know, I have a larger collection under my underpass, even though I know he made some strong moves in that direction. We have Project Room Key, which I know you're very excited about at item 24. We've got $120 a night going to the Sportsman's Lodge, which is shuttered because they're ripped down a classical cultural landmark to put up a mall that nobody wants or needs. And while doing that, they've filled the place with allegedly people who need to be housed, and it's very expensive. There's this guy, Ben Besley, and the group at Sportsman's Lodge, who was originally Richard Weintraub, a crony of the mayor in Concordia. It's appalling, and they're paying him off an enormous amount of money to sort of house people, which, you know, has some people pleased to be helping out and has others worried, you know, about the impact. And I know you're going to look at what is the way to, you know, deal with Room Key once it's over, which will be hopefully as soon as the pandemic comes to the end. But we have to do more. And to put hate crimes on the agenda and, you know, payments from Parks and Rec,
Mr. Previn, you want to move on to your general public comment? Mr. Previn?
Well, I would like to go to my general public comment. Yeah, I mean, I find this stuff an agenda. You've got Joy Atkinson, one of the old cronies from CG10 who runs the Neighborhood Empowerment Bank, you know, hidden in the agenda in a spot where you can't speak about it. You've got appointments to the Library Commission. Now, nobody has a nasty thing to say about Mai Lassiter, but is that really what you want at the Library Commission now, a woman who's at the fundraisers, or do you want someone who's on the street who knows what it's like and why libraries are so important and why it's so appalling that they've been shuttered at this, even during the pandemic? We should have figured out a way. People go and do all sorts of things. That is a place where people sought refuge and do seek refuge. And regarding off-leash parks, you know, I think this is a critical issue. People need open space. And in Studio City, we have Kara Trosi and Paul Krikorian running around putting price tags on any little scrap of open space you see, including our parks and our right-of-way. It's just unbelievable. So I really would encourage, you know, the city council to meet on a regular basis, to quit hiding. They've canceled almost half of their committee meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Previn.
And half of their meetings. We don't meet on Friday. It's appalling.
Thank you, Mr. Previn. Let's move on to the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 5161, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 5161, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 0479, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Gerald Owens.
Yes, what items would you like to speak on this morning?
We left an email. I'm sorry. Get ready to tell you right now. He's pulling it up right now. Sorry.
Okay.
23.
Caller, the items
23.
available for public comment this morning are items 23 through 27.
23.
23. Okay. 23, okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Speaker.
By
Go ahead.
cutting the housing funding from $97 million to $30 million, we would leave over 2,000 people temporarily out of housing in our neighborhood. Without a permanent solution, we need the city council to amend this item 23 and approve $97 million permanently for housing 3,000 of our most vulnerable neighbors. And I was previously homeless, and I know how important it is to really have some kind of agency to give us the support that we need to encourage us to keep to be permanent housing, because being homeless on the streets makes a male and a female very vulnerable to abuse and misuse and drug addiction and sickness and you know, so by me being housed.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we hang up?
Caller with the phone number ending in 7059, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 7059, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Zachary Warma, item number 23.
You go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Good morning, council members. Zachary Warma, Public Affairs at the Downtown Women's Center here, calling regarding item number 23, specifically the city's use of ESG COVID funds for rapid rehousing and shared housing. On behalf of DWC and the other service providers who stepped up to house and support thousands of Angelinos through Project Roomkey, it's essential that you amend this motion and restore the original $97 million for rapid rehousing and shared housing put forth by the CAO's office. As others have noted, this figure has been reduced to a mere $30 million. If you approve the proposed $30 million for rapid rehousing and shared housing, 2,000 individuals will be left without a permanent housing solution after Project Roomkey winds down, which runs counter to the stated policy of this council, the county, and WASA. DWC has provided housing and services to over 80 women through our management of our Project Roomkey site. We are particularly concerned about this funding reduction given that over 1,500 individuals who have participated in Project Roomkey have past or current experience with domestic or intimate personal violence. Please amend item number 23 and approve $97 million to permanently house 3,000 of our most vulnerable neighbors as outlined by the CAO's original report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and take the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 1415, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 1415, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Michael Schneider. I'd like to speak on item 27.
You have 1 minute. Go ahead.
So, Uplift Melrose, which Councilmember Koretz is going to pull and kill today, had the support of the majority of residents, businesses, both schools, religious institutions, and both neighborhood councils. It was $50 million of free money from the state that would have gone into Melrose, a community which has dealt with riots and has boarded up stores and fires. It's on the city's mobility plan and on our high injury network. Do we really want to help people get out of cars in this town? Do we really care about climate change? If we turn down $50 million of free state money with overwhelming community support, I ask the City Council, what is enough to actually move us forward into the future, redesign our roads, and actually tackle climate change? Shame on you, Koretz. Thank you.
Next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 6039, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
51. There was a mistake. That's already been adopted. I know. You guys are too fast. Call them up. Tell them to just rip it up.
Caller with the phone number ending in 6039, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 6039, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 1047, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 1047, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. What items do you want to speak on?
Okay, so the items that I would like to speak on are item 27 and public comment.
Okay,
That's regarding homelessness, right?
The items available to speak on are items 23 through 27.
Okay, yeah, that's okay, yeah, I'll speak on that.
Okay.
That and public comment.
All right, so
Okay, you have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Okay, I won't take up all the time. Again, my name is Sylvester, and I am with The Love We Don't See. And this issue that we're having with homelessness, I'm gonna take time out right now to pray for the council, pray for your conscience, pray for empathy, pray for love, because right now, history is gonna look back, and history is gonna, provide context to what people were doing at the moment in which they had power to create change and do something meaningful and leave a legacy. Right now, we're not protecting the least of us. When we look at all the issues that we're facing, it could be easily done, and a lot of that is investing in prevention versus reacting to things. Imagine a budget in which we spent over half the budget, like we do in policing, into things like homelessness, affordable housing, mental health services, education, after-school programs, infrastructure, job training. If we invest in things like that, there's less of a need for police. There's less crime for police to police. You're not only risking citizens' lives here, you're risking the lives of officers too, because you're putting them in precarious
I think
situations.
we've moved a little far away from the agenda items. Do you want to move on to your general public comment if you want to keep talking about this?
Well, okay, yeah. Well, I'm trying to talk about that we need to focus on homelessness. That's the thing. We need to invest in creating affordable housing for homelessness. I'll move on to the general public comment right now.
Okay.
So this is my 1 minute. I've called repeatedly over the weeks for the council to take a public stand on the 13th Amendment. It's the root of the issues that we're facing today, and everything that we've seen, systemically, of disenfranchisement of black and brown people are rooted and stem from the 13th Amendment. And if you're not familiar with it, it says, neither slavery nor indentured servitude shall exist within the United States except as punishment for a crime. And ever since then, poverty has been over-criminalized and exploited for profit. The answer to the solutions that we need is right here. I'd like the council to take a stand on this. Be the change. Leave a legacy. This is an opportunity. I'm gonna keep on calling. I hope that you guys hear me one day, but this is an opportunity to leave a lasting image on your time serving this city, because that's your job. And that's all I have today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 4208, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 4208, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, Rob Swan. I'd like to speak on items 24, 25, and general public comment.
You have 2 minutes, and then your 1 minute of general public comment. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. These two items, Project Room Key and permanent supportive housing, represent just two of your many failures that you've slow walked in finding shelter for the unhoused. Your effort to build supportive housing is falling short of its goals, and now Project Room Key managed to fall even shorter of its goals. Should we be surprised that as the program's ramping down, we never even reached a third of the original goal? The timeline speaks for itself. These motions passed back in May, but only 4 months later, after the ramp down already began, are they coming back for a council discussion on how we can fully utilize Project Room Key? The timeline speaks for itself and reflects hideously upon you. I think the biggest question is, what are you going to do about it? And we aren't left with much that's useful here. It's not exactly clear in this report that it responds to Bonin's motion, which asks for explanations for why people aren't participating Instead of hearing directly why each hotel that received public money has declined to participate in Project Roomkey, we got a bunch of general anonymous excuses. The reality is we're in the midst of a multi-year pandemic and we have a looming eviction crisis. This problem is only going to get worse. Judge Carter, while being a nice blunt tool to get you to the table, has limited utility and actually forcing you to truly get your shit together. What you actually need to do, and maybe you need to wait until after the election so you can all have some clarity, is actually just figure the fucking thing out. You can get all the report backs you want, but unless you actually have clarity in what you're asking for a report back on, you really have no idea how we're going to get to actually solve these problems. For my general public comment, I think Colonel Price recused himself yesterday and didn't provide an explanation. This was an issue last week. What does it say that our council members and our city attorney stand idly by as a colleague openly violates state law at a council meeting in the midst of an FBI investigation? Your silence in the face of all of that is representative of exactly how Jose Huizar and Mitch Englander felt liberated to corrupt and be corrupted. Lastly, I think it was funny a couple of weeks ago in a conversation we heard Councilmember Corian acknowledge the horse trading of redistricting. When redistricting came up, none of you actually spoke substantively on the matter and provided any conversation there. Whatever the problem is, big, small, you don't actually have that conversation that needs to happen. I just don't know what you're ever going to do to get your shit together.
Caller with a phone number ending in 0899, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 0899, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Oh, hi. Hold on a second, I have to mute my thing.
So, speaker,
Okay,
please turn off the volume on your device. Can you tell us what items
Hello?
you want to speak on? Yes, what items you want to speak on?
Yes, I would like to speak on 24 and 25 and the general public comment.
Okay, you have 2 minutes for your items and a minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Stacey Dawson Stearns. Okay, item 24, just like Rob said, it's a failure. It's a failure and it's time to address the fact that you're failing. Why don't you consult with the community orgs who are on the ground assisting our unhoused neighbors? Ask them, ask Streetwatch, ask LA Can, ask Gay Town for All. Just reach out and ask somebody who knows what's going on, someone who actually goes into the streets and operates in assistance to our unhoused neighbors. Item 25, do you do anything besides asking for reports? Everyone knows that the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority is a failure. Why do you need a report on that? Stop spending money on reports and start taking action. We have no time. Since you refuse to put the eviction crisis on your agenda, we just have to keep reminding you. Okay, I'm just moving on to public comment, okay? My minute for public comment, please. I'm returning to items 19 through 21. Lee, correct. Blumenfeld, Cedillo, you are hollow men. City Council is waging a war on the unhoused. Yesterday during a council meeting, as Murray presided over a technologically unsound circus of ineptitude, Los Angeles Police Department and Sanitation were conducting sweeps. If you all had a half an hour to sign into Zoom, you couldn't do it, but you're expecting unhoused people with disabilities to move their encampments in 30 minutes. I think that you would do better to turn your idea of service around. It's clear that you're tuned into NIMBY and property owner constituents. This is not Los Angeles. Los Angeles is comprised of working class and low-income people. The glittering elite of LA who have your ears and who operate you like puppets love the systems of inequity, but they hate the evidence that those systems create. The fallout is at their feet, and they're asking you to remove humans because they don't want to look at the truth, and neither do you. So I'm suggesting that you shift your minds and your hearts and take on the responsibility to not only spark a shift in yourselves, but to inform and educate and expose the privileged minority that you serve and inspire them to assume their place in the interdependent matrix that is Los say fuck you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, let's move on to the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 9917, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 9917, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hello?
Hello, what items do you want to speak on?
23, 24, 25, and general public comment.
Okay, you have 3 minutes for your items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
With regard to item 23, I also would like to echo the voices of the Downtown Women's Center in saying that it's ridiculous for this final motion to have reduced the COVID funds being used from 97 million to 30 million. I'd also like to note that overall the expenditure, the dollar amount expenditure on all of these isn't necessarily going to be an issue with voters like me, but it's how that money is spent. I've worked at Bridge Home Shelters as a cook, and examining the facilities, examining the ingredients that I had available to me, examining the management of the facility, I didn't see where the fuck that money was going besides probably to the pockets of people who donated to you and Eric Garcetti. Because the people in those facilities weren't getting their needs met with crumbs that you were giving to them. So we really need to make sure that we can get our corrupt city council out of the expenditures that we make on these types of social issues, because you guys co-opt our messages and take all that money and funnel it to yourselves and leave the people who we need to serve with below standard services, to say the least. In regards to item 24, Project Roomkey has been a complete failure, and I don't understand why you guys need report backs and useless filings to remind you guys of stuff that you guys should be on top of already as council members. The same issue with item 25. Mary Martinez, like, what the fuck? You're the council president, and the most you can do is ask how many units are getting built by month. What the fuck does that do, Mary? What the fuck does that do? Get out in the streets and see what the homeless people need today, you fucking idiot. Moving on to general public comment. I think it's imperative on all of us to realize that this city council is completely useless, 100% corrupt. We have two Pauls who will do nothing but ruin the city and the services rich people. Even when there's free money for you guys to take, you guys will reject it. We have Herb Weston and people like Mike Bine who will get on Twitter instead of actually getting on the streets, getting their offices out there to help people. But you guys can post on Twitter all fucking day without actually doing anything, trying to score political points. Fuck you guys. Fuck Marquise Harris-Dawson for being a complete fucking sellout. Fuck Joe Buscarino for being a bootlicker who sucks the dick from cops. Fuck Monica Rodriguez for doing the same. Fuck every single one of you stupid fucking pieces of shit city council members for fucking ruining the city. Mitch O'Farrell, you're a fucking murderer for the way you treat homeless people. In fact, all of you are bloodthirsty fucking murderers for the way you treat homeless people in the city, and all of you can burn in fucking hell.
Thank you, caller. Let's move on to the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 3193, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Caller, can you turn your volume down so we can hear you? What items do you want to speak on?
Caller with the phone number ending in 3193, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 3193, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 1248, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 1248, please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Mimi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. What items do you want to speak on?
I'd like to speak on item 18 and give general comment, please.
18 has already been voted on. The available items for public comment are items 23 through 27.
Okay, I'll just give general comment then, please.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I've been on this call since 10, and I haven't heard a single thing. It's been dead silent. You guys need to get it together. This has been happening. These meetings are so inaccessible. God, I've already forgotten everything I was going to say because I'm so mad. You guys need to cancel rent, defund the police. I don't see anything about rent in any of these agendas. And like, I guess, how does it feel to be responsible for so much violence and death in this city? Yeah, I yield my time. Fuck all of you.
Let's go ahead and take the next caller.
Caller with the phone number ending in 4961, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on. Caller with the phone number ending in 4961, please state your name and what item you'd like to speak on.
Oh, I'd like to speak on item 27.
You have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Every time we ask how do we make our neighborhoods nicer and calmer and safer, we're told by city council members go out and show support. And that's exactly what happened with Uplift Melrose. And hundreds of people spent thousands of hours, and we were led to believe that this was going to go through. And then Councilmember Koretz killed it over traffic, which was sort of knowable at the beginning. And so I just wish the city council would tell us how can we be heard. If we care about trees and climate change and we want our streets safer for our kids, how do we communicate that? Or just say, we're never going to make these changes. Our streets will be freeways. Our children will never be safe walking to school or riding a bike. And we're stuck with this traffic and noise and pollution and asthma and car crashes. So I'm just asking us, let us know how we can speak so that you guys can hear us. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And that concludes public comment for today's meeting. Let's go ahead and move on to items that were called special. Let me just speak quickly about the substitute motion that I introduced on item 23. Last week, the ad hoc committee heard a series of CAO recommendations related to a roadmap for our homeless efforts. I think it's really critical and important that we balance that with the continued work in progress that we're all doing. So it's one of the reasons this was introduced. The substitute motion also designates the full allocation of the ESG COVID resources. However, it is done in a way that ensures accountability, transparency, and the positions that the council has made to make sure that we can make adjustments throughout the way. So I would just want to commend all of you who have projects this morning that are going to be able to move forward. So I commend your efforts on that, and I ask for an aye vote. Mr. Bonin, did you have anything to add on item 23?
Yes, Madam President, I do. I've still got some questions, and I wanted to ask LASA and CAO some questions. Originally, it was about the numbers in the report, but I have a question for them about the amendment as well.
Okay, the CAO, doesn't appear to be in the room. Was there a request to have him here? Hold on for just a second, Mr. Bonner. Sure. So, Mr. Bonin, we're allowing the CAO's office into our meeting. So give us just a second. I wasn't aware that LASA was here, but apparently they are. So do you want to come to the table? And just give us a heads up in the future because we need to secure those of us who are in council chambers.
Yeah, I thought my staff had reached out to yours. Apologies.
No, and it's fine. We just need to know for the safety of everybody that's working in the building. So go ahead and take a seat, and let me see if I can try one more time if I can't get the CEO on the line. So, Mr. Bonin, it doesn't appear that neither Yolanda or Meg have joined our council meeting. Was there a request from your office to have them participate?
Yes, there was, but I'm happy to just ask questions.
Okay, why don't we start with Lhasa, who's in the room. Heidi has joined us, and let me keep trying the other two women from the CEO's office, okay?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Bonin.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, thanks for being here today. I know this is an important issue for Lhasa. With all of the pressure that has been coming down, both from the, I hope, helpful intervention from Judge Carter, and with all of the increased pressure upon Lhasa right now to find alternative places for people to be housed once Project Room Key ends, and as we're hearing, it's starting to phase out and hopefully be replaced in some aspects by Project Home Key. There's tremendous pressure to do faster, quicker, less expensive, nimbler ways of housing people. And I was delighted after years of saying we need to be doing more rapid rehousing and shared housing to see in the roadmap that your agency put out about a month ago, and I believe the county approved such a robust expenditure of $97 million in the ESG for interventions like rapid rehousing and shared housing, which give us an opportunity to not even have to put people in pallet shelters, but directly into homes, and can be permanent interventions instead of temporary ones. There's concerns about Lhasa's ability to spend the money and spend it properly. One, I'd like to get from you a sense of why the 97 million figure is important and necessary to meet the challenge and the timing of the moments. And then I'd like your response and feedback on the amendment, which says pending certain reports, you can have access to the 30 million, and then pending other reports, you may have access to up to 97 million for these interventions.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, and happy to answer, being joined by CAO as well.
Hold on for just a second. I'm so sorry. Mr. Bonin, we've now been joined by the CEO's office. They were not aware that they were supposed to be in the meeting, so they just ran down the hall. Let me make sure I get them in the proper seating before we allow Ms. Heidi to answer your question.
Let me scoot over.
With you and
sure.
scoot over.
Okay, we're situated now.
Okay.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Bonin. So in terms of the 97 million, really it comes down to scale. What we're seeing right now through COVID-19 is unprecedented resources coming to Los Angeles through the federal government, the state, the county, and the city all making those investments. What we know is these big investments represent big increases in our system. So when we think about our service providers who are at the ground level, the nonprofits doing this work, the work that it will take to staff functions functions and housing functions like shared housing at a $97 million scale. They'll need to be hiring people and bringing and building up that capacity. So the sooner that that money becomes available, the sooner that they can start doing that work, so we can move people from Project Room Key, under freeways, all of the different priorities that we've set forth can really start building momentum as quickly as possible.
And I understand the need for staffing up, and we've had problems historically in spending money, Measure H money and some of our state funds, because it took the agencies so long to staff up. It sounds like you're saying the agencies will be hesitant to staff up until the money is secure. How is this going to translate out into the streets, not from the agency perspective, but from the ability to get people off the streets and into a housing intervention?
So it's a multi-layered approach, but to your initial point, that's exactly right. Agencies want to staff up relative to the amount of resources they have committed, so we're not overstaffing and working in a deficit. So to this point, the agencies have done an immense amount of built a lot of momentum and staffing up through Project Room Key. We've moved thousands of people indoors, and now is time to pivot to the moment of moving people inside permanently. So whether that's happening at a $30 million pace or $97 million pace, that will be measured based on what is allocated. The other piece of it that's important is the county has also invested resources that are already out there on the street, so providers are ramping up initially, and this would just further enhance those efforts to make folks move even faster.
So we're looking to, in addition to the Project Room Key folks that we don't want to have wind up back out on the streets, we're looking to meet the judge's mandated goal of 6,700 people. How many does 30 million allow us to house, and how many does the 97 million allow us to house?
Our estimation is that 30 million would allow us to house anywhere from 750 to 1,000 individuals. It depends on their acuity, whereas the 97 million is up to 3,000 individuals receiving housing.
So when you go out, one of the tough things always is when you offer somebody a resource, say we'd like to get you out of here, and there's no resource available, then you've kind of lost them for a while. We all know there are many people who say they do not want something and it takes a while, but then there's a lot of folks who say they want something and they don't get it, and they don't hear back from us in a while. Is it harder to go out and make the offer when you know across a city as big as Los Angeles you only have a pool of 750 versus a pool of 3,000?
Absolutely, and I think what's important here too, because I hear the concerns about spending the money and making sure that it's not only allocated but spent and used in the most appropriate way. We are really committed to making that happen too, and being transparent about outcomes and our data. I think what's different with this money and with the recovery plan is that we're adding flexibility. So recognizing it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to serve these folks. If somebody can be served with a couple $100s a month, that's what we want to give them. We don't want to tell them they have to wait for the permanent supportive housing platinum standard if it's not what they need. So what we're trying to do with all of the resources is really create pathways that will move people into permanent housing quickly with the lowest cost and lowest intervention possible for them to be successful, and then building in the flexibility and safety nets around it, so we are deploying resources faster than we have historically.
And say the council approved giving you 30 today, but said you've got to come back with some data and some evidence before we get to anywhere between 31 and 97 million. How soon do you need to have the approval for the 31st million before it causes a gap in service or problems even in offering to the thousands of people who are out there now?
So I would say from the time that the money is allocated, of course, we work with our partners at HCID to also get contracts out and get that process moving. It generally takes 30 to 60 days for that money to, in best case scenario, for that money to hit the hands of the providers to actually begin to be spent with the purposes that we've all envisioned. Does that answer your question?
We're asking for a report on the 15th of every month. Before you're able to show anything, it's gonna take a couple months for that money to get out there. And so then we need to act on whether or not that is sufficient to continue the funding stream. So it sounds like it's a lengthy holdup then.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So I had a question on the amending motion because it says allocate the 30 up to 97 million with the 30, pending the reports. I wasn't clear if it was making the initial 30 required to have reports done first, or if the 30 was immediate. But regardless, I still would like to make an amendment that we allocate the full 97 million.
Okay, we've been joined by the CEO. Do you have any questions for either Meg or Yolanda?
Meg, I'm wondering.
Hold on for just a second, Mr. Bonnet. I got to bring her to the table.
Oh, sure.
Just make sure there's social distancing. Think you're fine. Good morning, Meg.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Mr. Bonnet.
Meg, it was the CAO initially was supporting the recommendation for the 97 million. Can you explain from the CAO's perspective what the need for that was and what the rationale was for supporting that expenditure upfront?
Sure. Meg Barkley, City Homeless Coordinator with the CAO's office. So the rationale behind the $97 million recommendation, and as we said in the report, actually, LAHSA had originally requested a higher number for 7,500 placements over 2 years, and we felt that 3,000 placements was what we could reasonably expect, at least starting out at this pretty impressive ramp-up expectation. And also, we also based this on the roadmap associated with the agreement between the city and the county related to the LA Alliance lawsuit, looking at what is in the council district plans, what we are learning about projects that have been proposed, projects that are coming online, and what we would need to meet the two milestones in that agreement to reach 6,000 new interventions by April 16th of 2021 and 6,700 total by December 16th, 2021, and the 3,000 interventions fits into that nicely. It will be difficult, especially with the April deadline, to meet that commitment to reach the 6,000 interventions by March without the 3,000 interventions, the 3,000 placements that are recommended as a result of the $97 million recommendation.
And if we don't do the 3,000 placements through the rapid rehousing and shared housing outlined in the ESG, then that effectively makes us rely upon PSH, which just ain't there yet, or the pallet shelters, which are coming in at a significantly higher cost per person than the rapid rehousing or the shared housing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the thing about the placements that are recommended in the report is that at least there's a portion of them that it's almost like we're front loading the PSH that will come online. We're putting the folks that would be getting into PSH once it opens into rapid units now, so that we can have those placements sooner, given the construction timelines that we're seeing in the pipeline itself. So we're sort of kind of moving those placements up in time so that when those units become available, people will move out of their rapid unit into a PSH unit when it becomes available. I think the thing about that is different from typical rapid rehousing that we think has a better, why we were willing to recommend this, because we think it has a better shot at success, is that there are more intensive case management services associated with those placements for people who are matched to PSH to better ensure that they're able to be stably housed in a rapid rehousing unit. The expectation isn't necessarily, as it would be with other rapid rehousing placements, that people would end up taking over their rent per se or moving on to a shallow subsidy necessarily over time, but that the expectation is that they're going to need PSH, and since those folks do need PSH, it stands to reason that they would need more intensive services when they're initially placed in a rapid rehousing unit.
Thanks, Meg. So just to wrap it up, of the four changes in the substitute motion, I think three of them are phenomenal and love them. The one on 8, I still would make a motion to grant the full 97 million absent some clearer rapid process for the additional money. So that would be my motion.
Okay, Mr. Bonnie, we will go ahead and take 2 votes, one on your amending motion and one on my substitute. We have other questions from other members. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I don't really have any questions. Just to comment, a few comments about this, and that is, your amending motion is something I support. It's simply exercising our oversight and our fiduciary responsibility. I think that us approving an expenditure of $30 million in the immediate is a really good way to go, because we're going to absolutely spend the entire allocation of 97 million, but this just inserts a little bit of oversight that we otherwise wouldn't have. There is no reason to believe that doing this in 3 separate allocations will slow anything down, but we do have a fiduciary responsibility and an accountability piece that we as city council members are responsible for. So I think it's fine, and as Ms. Marsden said, we'll be able to measure the outcomes in short little segments as we allocate more funding to achieve this goal, and I think it's reasonable. Not unlike what we did with HHH expenditures early on, or a couple of years ago, when the costs of the individual units were beginning to skyrocket then, and we made a decision as a council not to allocate more than $140,000 per unit, no matter what they eventually wound up costing. As a result of that decision, where we leaned in and exercised our fiduciary responsibility, we're going to get 10,000 units of HHH housing now. And so I think this is a sensible and responsible amendment that I wholeheartedly support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Cedillo?
Yes, Madam Chair, I want to be very clear about this, that the commitment here is to 30 today and to 97 or 907, or whatever it may cost for us to get people off the streets and into housing that affords them a modicum of the dignity and respect that they deserve. But I want to be very clear that we're not going to just throw money at this. We want to make sure that we're moving rapidly, to take that phrase, efficiently, effectively. I'm really frustrated, and I'm glad that we're holding the money and meting it out in the manner in which is being suggested in this motion, because we're taking too long. And I have a sense of frustration, and I know all of us, and I know all Angelenos do, with our inability to move in a way that's really having a visible impact on the problems that confront us with respect to homelessness. So I appreciate this accountability. I hope brings us towards more effectiveness and more efficiency. I see no value in putting all the money up front so that people think that it's there and they're not going to be held accountable to results. I think we need to address it in the way that's being suggested in your motion, so that we can have accountability, call people on the carpet, if you will, and make sure that people feel motivated to be efficient and effective, so that they know that after this 30, there'll be another 30, and there'll be another 30, but they've got to spend it, and they've got to spend it right. And so I'm speaking for your substitute motion. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Blumenfield?
Great, thank you. I had a couple of questions. Not so much about the substitute amendment, but generally about the rapid rehousing and how this works financially. And I mean, I completely echo what Mr. Cedillo said. I share his frustration in terms of the just the need for urgency here. The costs of these at 97 you know, if we do 97 million at 3,000 units, that's about $32,000 a person, or, you know, if you're just putting all that money into a subsidy, it's a $2,700 subsidy a month. How much of this money goes to the actual rental subsidy, and how much goes to case management or other related bureaucracy?
Do you have that? No, you go ahead. I don't have it on me.
Who are you asking that question of, Mr. Blumenfield, the CEO's office?
To either Heidi or Meg.
I think they're getting that information for you. That was an excellent question, by the way.
Yeah.
Hold on for just a second. I don't think we have an answer for you just yet.
And while they're looking it up, I'll just tell you why I'm concerned. I mean, I'm concerned about all of our prices seem to be going way out of control. I mean, the pallet shelters are costing way more. Permanent supportive housing is ridiculously expensive. It seems like we have these great intentions and we're throwing money at the problem, but everything costs way too much. And I want to also understand, with these numbers, how it compares to pallet shelters, because part of the answer to that will be determined in whether, how long this money lasts, because this money, as I understand it, is only good for 12 months or 18 months. But then what happens? And so if we're going to compare apples to apples and compare rapid rehousing dollars to pallet shelters, well, the pallet shelters are going to last 5-10 years. The rapid rehousing, if it's a direct subsidy, only lasts as long as that direct subsidy lasts. So if it's a 12-month subsidy and that's $2,700 per month, it's gone. And related to that question is, do we consider this rapid rehousing, is this permanent housing or is this temporary housing? A lot of callers talked about it as if it was permanent, but just looking at it, it seems like it is very much a temporary thing, and I would like to get clarification on that as well.
And I can jump in. Thank you for the question. So I can get you the breakup, but when you think about the subsidies that we're looking at, you really think about at least three different pathways that someone could take. Rapid rehousing is the first stop. It is intended to be permanent housing. Ideally, a rapid rehousing model says, we'll move you in, we'll give you a subsidy to help supplement whatever your income is, and over the period of 2 years, your portion of the rent will increase and the subsidy will decrease until you get to the point where you can take over the rent on your own. That's standard rapid rehousing. The way that we're using it is we're doing the traditional model, but we're also using it as a bridge. So we're saying if you are going into rapid rehousing and we realize you don't need rapid rehousing because you don't need case management services, you really need $100 a month just to help make the difference on your rent because you're working and it's just not penciling. That would step you down into a shallow subsidy pathway. So that's like the lowest intervention possible, where we're just giving you a couple $100 a month to supplement. Rapid rehousing is kind of the middle, where we're supplementing a lot up front, and then over a 2-year period, you take over more and more of the rent until you can sustain it with your own income. And then the third pathway is really permanent supportive housing, where you need intensive case management, you need that full rental subsidy, and you'll likely need it for the rest of your life because of your high acuity. So all three of those pathways are captured in what we're estimating for housing placements, and our projections are looking at where do we think people will ultimately land, as opposed to saying, we don't have permanent supportive housing available for you today, so you just need to wait. We're saying we'll put you into rapid rehousing, we'll get you case management until PSH becomes available, and then we'll graduate you up into permanent supportive housing because that's truly what you need. So it is meant to be as flexible as possible. So again, we're spending the least amount of money with the resource that best meets the individual need.
I appreciate that, and that's helpful, although it doesn't really help me get my mind around the costs. If you have somebody, and I know that I usually think of rapid rehousing as a way to help the folks who have a lower acuity score, but I know that LAHSA tends to push people in that have the higher acuity scores. And so for somebody with a high acuity score, meaning they're not going to be able to be on their own, they're going to need permanent supportive housing. If we use the rapid rehousing dollars and they need a full subsidy, that means we're paying their rent for presumably a year and a half or whatever it is until they can get into permanent supportive housing. But then that resource is done, right? As opposed to a pallet shelter where if you put them in there and then they get permanent supportive housing, you still have the pallet shelter to put the next person in. Is that correct?
Somewhat. I would say when they move into permanent supportive housing, however, the unit that they were in for rapid rehousing remains available for the next person who needs rapid rehousing to stay in. So it really is a continuum.
But only if we have more money, because the rapid rehousing is paying somebody's rent payment. So if we have the 97 million is going to be gone in a year or 2 years, right? In fact, that's a question. When will the 97? If we gave you the 97 million today, when would it be gone?
I believe we said 2022, right? The end of 2022. To expenditure. Yeah, the end of 2022. That would get us housing subsidies through the end. So to your point, you're absolutely right. We'll need to figure out other ways to pick up rental subsidies in 2022 collectively, as a system in Los Angeles.
Right, but so that's the downside or fear of some of this is that we potentially are just setting ourselves up for a cliff. If we're putting the people in the highest acuity scores in, we're still the logjam is still our permanent supportive housing of when we can get those folks in, but it's not actually going to expand the number of people that we can help. It'll just front load it a little bit, and that $97 million is going to, in essence, a loan to front load our moving people into permanent supportive housing.
Well, and I think the beauty of this too is, one, it doesn't only look at folks with high acuity, because we see that all the time, is we have really high acuity folks that need the resources and they either have to wait, but then it also leaves other folks with lower acuity out of housing options. So this is meant to be a solution for anybody regardless of your acuity, because we have the pathways. I think what we see consistently in our rapid rehousing program is there are some people who are high acuity. There's actually a high percentage who end up doing just fine in rapid rehousing. They just need the year or two to stabilize. They don't actually end up graduating into permanent supportive housing. So because we've seen that model work historically, we're confident that now moving somebody into a permanent option that allows them to stabilize versus to another interim option becomes more cost effective over time, because then we're not building new stock and we're actually investing in their rehousing and solving the homelessness crisis that they're experiencing.
And to that
Isn't
point,
this a temporary option? I mean, the rapid, as you said, it only lasts until 2022.
it's actually, the recommendation for the 97 million is actually.
I'm sorry, could you speak closer to the mic? Couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Meg Barclay, can you hear me now? The recommendation for the 97 million is actually for the cost to place 3,000 people within 18 months, but also support them for a total of up to 4 years. So in the event that, and that probably will end up, that tapers off over time. The cost of probably by the end, it's just those households that are getting a shallow subsidy would still be supported over that period of time. Oh, thank you. But to your question before, Mr. Blumenfeld, the actual operating cost of a pallet shelter or one of the other interim housing solutions that we're looking at in the homelessness roadmap, and the rental costs associated with a rapid rehousing or shared housing replacement are roughly, it's a pretty apples to apples comparison. The operating cost of $45 per bed per night is about $1,400 a month. And I believe the rental cost that they're looking at for rapid rehousing, Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, is somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 a month. And so at least if you're looking at the cost of operating against the cost of rent, those two things are pretty apples to apples comparison. And I think the real benefit of looking at and at least taking a risk on this model is that the idea is getting people into the units now and not having to build them. And as you know, the capital costs of these sites, we have to put money into site prep work and the other types of infrastructure improvements that are needed to establish the interim housing sites, and that takes time, and it also takes additional money that we don't have associated with rapid rehousing or shared housing. So that's why we sort of are recommending a balanced approach here, where we're taking advantage of units available in the market now and building assets that will be in place for 3 to 5 years and able to continue to house folks. But again, the operating costs associated with a bed over the course of a year are roughly the same as a rapid rehousing unit over the course of a year.
So what I'm hearing is if you're spending about $1,200 to $1,400 subsidy, that means about half the money is going to, not to subsidy the rent, but is going to case management, bureaucracy, and everything else. Is that right? I mean, because
It's about 10% admin, and then go ahead, then the other.
Yeah, we estimate it's a little bit hard to piece out the services because it's such a sliding scale, but I would say about 15 million or so of the 97 is for the services piece of the proposal. Obviously, it varies from person to person, but that was our projection in looking at where people are going to go.
I'd love to see the numbers written out. It doesn't quite.
We can give you the breakout if
I mean,
that's helpful.
it's just the way I think about things, but it doesn't add up in the sense that, you know, I look at the 1,200 is half of the subsidy. If you took the money out as a full, you know, if you took all the money and divided it up and did it on a per month basis, you'd get almost $2,700 a month. So if you're putting half of that a month into the rental subsidy, then the other half is going somewhere. And if it's 10% and 15%, it doesn't add up. So I'd love to. I mean, I'm sure it makes sense somehow. I just am not seeing it.
We're
But
happy
I
to
would
provide
love to get those numbers out, because I really do want to see the apples to apples comparison with all of our different options. And I think the best things are yet to come with things like, you know, congregate housing once we get past COVID, and other creative shared models where we can really get people into less expensive items. Will safe parking folks be eligible for rapid rehousing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all going to be based on folks in PRK, obviously the Judge Carter work too. So, but absolutely people in safe parking are eligible for rapid rehousing.
Because that's been a trouble, is that, you know, I've got a great program behind my office, and I talk to these folks regularly, and they don't get the services, as you know, because their acuity score isn't high enough, but their life could be turned around with a relatively, you know, shallow subsidy. So
Exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to provide, is this menu of options to say you don't have to only need PSH. We want to serve all acuities.
Mr. Blumenfield, I need to move on to another member.
I've got two more questions. Should I ask them quick, or should I come back?
Let me come back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Rue?
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to thank you for your detailed amendments to hold LAHSA accountable. Because no matter how much we build in the city of LA, we are currently beholden to LAHSA for outreach and services. So thank you for those amendments. I wholeheartedly support. But I have two lines of questioning. I just want a clarification on Councilmember Bonin's number 8 amendment. So I think he agrees with your premise, but is Councilmember Bonin just asking for the deletion of with expenditure authority of 30 million? So it would read approve up to 97 million in emergency solutions grants?
Yes.
Yes, he is.
So can I ask the CAO or LAHSA, whoever could answer this, what's the difference between removing those 4 or 5 words on the impact?
As I understand it, the intention of the amendment is that we would reserve up to the $97 million for rapid rehousing, and but authorize LAHSA to spend up to 30 million of that at this time, pending the report backs on the effectiveness of the program and what we're seeing as far as lease-ups, and if there are additional funds needed and everyone agrees that it's going well, another tranche of funding could be provided for the program. The distinction would be with the expenditure authority. That's what LAHSA will be able to put on contracts with service providers to spend, and so they won't be ramping up to a $97 million program. They'll be ramping up to a $30 million program, and then ramping up again to the next iteration as we expand the scale.
So does that mean there will be delays if we gave them a $30 million cap?
I think we'll have to see how it goes out the gate and see what people are what they're able to do under the contract authority that we have now, and then and I think we'll have a better idea of what additional money we'll do once that funding is when and if that funding is approved.
Well, LAHSA, would it if we gave you authority for 30 million and you came back for another 30 million after that, how will that affect your implementation of the strategy to house 3,000 people?
Yeah, I would say if we receive the 30 million, our service providers will ramp up to that $30 million mark, as opposed to ramping up to the 97. And so it would essentially, we'd be ramping up to 30 million 3 separate times as opposed to 97 million once. So to Meg's point, it's hard to tell what the delays would be, but it would be multiple ramp up efforts throughout this short period of time as opposed to one with the full funding.
So another question for the CAO. It's my understanding that if we did go with Councilmember Bonin's language where it says approve up to 97 million, at any time can we take the money back or reduce the money for if we feel that LAHSA is not meeting their goals?
Yes. So we could reduce the funding. We could amend the consolidated plan to reduce the amount of money allocated somewhere else and change the contract authority that LAHSA has, and they would have to reduce the funding on their contracts with their service providers.
So basically, the council president's amendment is basically saying, we approve 30. If you want another 30, you got to come back and we approve another 30, versus while Councilmember Bonin's motion is saying, we approve the full 97. However, at any time, if you do not hit any of your benchmarks as outlined in the other amendments or the other parts of the motion, then we could cut back at any time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then, I do want to, I think it's, at this point, I think they're both great, but I want much flexibility, but I don't want to prevent any delays. And the fact that if we could hold back the money after we allocate the 97, I'll be inclined to be supporting Councilmember Bonin's motion. But I do also want to ask about what Councilmember Bob Blumenfield was talking about. Because I know LAHSA typically does prioritize highest acuity level for housing resources. When it comes to this rapid rehousing monies, is it the same thing? Are you targeting those individuals with the highest acuity scores?
I think just before LAHSA answers that, I wanted to make the clarification that the report, we're actually sort of, the report that is is recommending the allocation of the funding, and the committee report is recommending the allocation of the funding for the target population associated with the agreement with the county for the 6,700 interventions. And that has a very specific target population. It's actually a little bit broader than the target population of the LAHSA's recovery housing plan that they have put out, because we basically are committing to either housing or putting people into interim housing, safe parking, other interventions, who live within the 500 feet of a freeway, underpass, overpass, or ramp. And that's 3,100 of the 6,700. And then the other, I'm sorry, for some reason I can't do math, 4,600 would be, 3,600 would be the older adults or people who are otherwise vulnerable to COVID-19. And so that's the distinction, that's the target population for this. So it's generally understood that people living near freeways are lower acuity, and so these interventions could be made available to those regardless of, because that's the prioritization criteria that we're giving to LAHSA with this funding.
Great. So that answers my question. But so if we wanted to, and this is for the CAO, so if we wanted to change the focus for whatever reason of the people being targeted, let's say for some reason we want to just focus on seniors only or focus on something different, are we able to do that?
With this funding?
Yes.
That's what we've done with this funding. I would say that the broader programs that are implemented, and this again, and that's sort of the distinction also between the program that's before you today and the regular program that we fund under through the general fund and others, and through the county funds through Measure H and other funding sources. There are prioritization criteria that are established as a part of having a coordinated entry system that would continue to apply to those programs. But this program is special, and it's a response to a very specific circumstance, and so those prioritization criteria are established and associated and linked with this funding.
And just wanted to clarify too, we're already aware of that as well. So we've built our systems around so we can track this particular population. We know like if people are coming from PRK, if it was pursuant to Judge Carter's order. So we're prepared to track all of that and bring accountability to that too.
So Meg, I fully agree with the direction we're going in, especially for the freeway populations, working with Judge Carter, no questions there whatsoever. But let me ask it in a different way. If for some reason, if we wanted to change direction for whatever reason, because the targets weren't hit or anything else, and we wanted to focus on a different population or a different program use altogether, is that possible? So once we've approved the $97 million today, if something else happens in the next couple of months and we want to go in a completely different direction, can we do that, and how do we do that?
Yes, I think you can do that. There's obviously delays and complications with course corrections like that as it relates to population, but yes, we could, just as with the approval of the funding, it comes with the instruction to allocate this funding and these resources toward assisting that target population. If the target population were to change, then that direction would change. But I think that we'll get a better insight into whether and how that should happen with the reports that are that we would be requiring of LAHSA with your approval of the ad hoc COVID committee report and amendments, to be able to get a lot better and more real-time information on performance than we've had before.
Great, thank you. And while I am concerned with some of the procedures and protocols that LAHSA might have, I think the highest priority here is to make sure this money goes out so that there is no delays whatsoever. Thank you for those answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues, for an interesting and thoughtful discussion. I just wanted to speak briefly in support of the Council President's substitute motion, which I think addresses the need for providing this funding, but also addresses the great need that we have for measuring outcomes and creating a different regimen about homelessness response than what we have traditionally had, which measures not dollars spent and not even dollars spent per person, but actually starts to address outcomes and aligning outcomes with our strategic goals and aligning our spending with achieving our strategic goals. And so I think this substitute motion is an important step in that direction. Another important step in that direction will be the motion that I introduced and co-presented with Mr. O'Farrell, seconded by Mr. Cedillo, to create a more unified reporting system of outcome measurements to address when it is appropriate and when it is not appropriate to sole source contracts to homeless services providers as opposed to competitively granting them based on actual results and cost effectiveness in achieving those results. I think this is the new regimen that we need to all embrace. And I recognize, excuse me, I recognize that there are legitimate concerns about providing enough certainty to providers that they can staff up and so on. But whatever advantage there may be there in doing that is essentially defeated by the points that Mr. Ryu just made, that at any time the council can change direction. At any time the council can direct changes in priorities. If I'm a service provider and I'm hearing, oh good, well there's $90+ million that's been allocated, but the council can change that, I'm not going to staff up any more than I'm going to staff up when $30-some million is appropriate. So I think that the right balance is struck by the council president's motion. I support it. And I just want to say that since she's here, under Ms. Marston's leadership, I've already seen a change in the way LAHSA gathers data and shares it. And it's a welcome change. I think that this is something that we need to really push the accelerator down on and ensure that the public and the council see that the money that we spend and the money, more importantly, that the county is spending on services is actually getting people out of homelessness, not just moving them around, not just rotating them in and out through revolving doors, but actually starting to bend the arc and changing, getting them out of the cycle of homelessness altogether. That's what we need to be striving for, and I think what's before us today helps us to do that. So Madam President, I ask for all colleagues to support your substitute motion.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. And, thank you, Mr. Krikorian. I want to just echo, I think, it's tough. I look at Heidi's tenure, very brief tenure, and I have to say it's been a refreshing change from where we were. And I would be remiss if I didn't start with that conversation, because yes, we've got a very dark history to get past with respect to the work that we've endured with LAHSA. But I'm optimistic, and from the work and discovering even the flaws in our homeless count and the projections and the numbers, and working with Heidi on that directly, I'm optimistic about our ability to work together and have those accountability metrics. That's something that I've been working on, and even delving as far down with the service providers, because we need that level of accountability. Taxpayers deserve it, our communities deserve it, and we need to be able to tell that story. That said, Meg, I do have a question, and I know we just had in committee last week a conversation around Project Roomkey. And so when we're talking about this $97 million, how many of the individuals post-Project Roomkey, what is going to be the matriculation of those individuals, and how much of these numbers associated with the 97 million might be occupied by those that are currently, based on their acuity, based on some of the circumstances of those that are being housed right now in Project Roomkey? What's our estimation that a portion of this money might have to continue to support those individuals that are currently being served by Project Roomkey?
I think that, I don't know exactly what the proportion would be, but I do think that there's a strong overlap between the non-freeway portion of the 6,700, that between that portion and the Project Roomkey population. And I think the other thing that this effort and Project Roomkey have in common is that they're not, eligibility isn't based on acuity, it's based on vulnerability to either age or vulnerability to harm from contracting COVID-19. And so I would imagine that there would be some overlap between those populations, and the goal, obviously with Project Roomkey from the beginning, was to try and, it's kind of maybe a larger version of what we're talking about. It's the front load of the front load. So we've got people inside on a sort of temporary basis, and the hope would be that their ultimate endpoint would be permanent housing of some kind. I would say that having had several months inside of a PRK, they may have, even those that are permanent supportive housing eligible, are probably closer to maybe their assistance that would be needed under this program might be a little bit shorter, so that assistance could, when they shift into a PSH unit, that slot, as it were, could be then used for another person, as long as there's still money in the program. So, but it's hard to say what, I think the idea as a part of this is that those populations, but for an extended or some other type of housing assistance, would end up being dismissed or released or exited from a PRK back onto the streets that they came from. And so the hope would be that either they would end up in something like this, or maybe in one of the interim options that's being developed as a part of this, but they are part of the eligible population for the 6,700. So that 3,400 over or 3,600 over the freeway population would include, I would imagine, some portion of PRK residents currently.
So, I mean, I guess, and Heidi, you're going to have to help me with this, because again, when we're talking about this money that we're allocating, we're talking about some of this potentially already just being off the table for the purposes of continuing to support those that we've already placed into interim shelter. And so, Heidi, can you, I think part of what's important when we're talking about accountability and metrics, what we're missing is and I know it's a difficult thing to project, but part of what we have to do is project what populations and the demands of what those populations might be given their acuity levels, given what their circumstances are, if they're going to be aligned with potentially having their own SSI or whatever financial support to help them achieve independent living circumstances. So Heidi, is that something that you are currently tracking so that we have some estimation of what we're actually talking about applying of this 97 million potentially to that population that's currently being served by Operation Project Room Key?
Yeah, absolutely. And there, I would say at any given time, there's around 1,000 people who are residing in city-owned or operated PRK sites. And we are already working with those individuals. Some have already been moved out or placed into permanent housing. So we've brought in DPSS, we've brought in the DMV, we've brought in legal services. So they're already well on their way to getting all of their paperwork and everything ready. So we will have a good sense of what the best pathway is for each of those individuals. And part of the reporting we're building out for all of you are dashboards that can show you in a PRK site how many people are there and where are they going. So you know, did they go to rapid rehousing? Did they go to a permanent supportive housing unit or somewhere else? Similar to how we're going to be tracking the work around the Judge Carter and the encampments under the freeway. So we know not only who we're serving, but the pathway that they're going to and can tie the money that way. The challenge, I think, with PRK is just the time frame because the sites are ramping down. So making sure that we're working as quickly as possible to get those folks well on their way so they have every opportunity to take advantage of a permanent option.
Okay, because colleagues, what I would also recommend just with respect to the some of the reports back that are being requested as part of this process is through the outreach efforts that are engaged with respect to the population that are currently being served with Project Room Key that would then be matriculating through potentially being supported by the resources that we're allocating here today. But in addition to that, those that we're going to go through the process under the Judge Carter order, determining what the long-term possible implications are going to be of the service needs of that population is going to help us ascertain better allocations of our resources. Knowing that is a fundamental part of how we're going to know what we're actually looking at in terms of our long-term expenditures. And I think it goes to some of what Mr. Blumenfield had raised. It's part of it is what does the trajectory look like amongst the populations that we're serving, and knowing the answer to that. And LAHSA is the best suited, and the service providers, because you're the ones that are helping to case manage them. But without that information, it really does a disservice for both telling a better story, being accountable for the resources that are being allocated, and actually having better ability to allocate appropriately the resources in the areas where we need it. And I would ask that we also include that report back from LAHSA, because I think it's part of how we need to be informed in allocating our resources. So in terms of doing it with accountability, because I think that's part of the conversation that we're missing right now, is having a broader understanding of what the needs are, because it's such a varied circumstance amongst the populations that we're serving. Some might be just an interim solution that we just needed to provide them that housing gap for a couple of months until they moved back with family, or that they were just, they were the one paycheck away. The truth is that we're serving all those variety of needs. But the best way for us to ascertain how we allocate these resources, how we hold LAHSA accountable, is that very fundamental piece of information that tells us what's the long-term implications of these people remaining in homelessness or requiring permanent supportive housing versus, because I know several circumstances where we were matriculating families into their own apartments. What does that timeline look like? Because half of the battle is really getting to the weeds of that number. And so I would like to request to also include that information as part of the report back.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Madam President, and I certainly echo the comments of our last couple of speakers. But I do have a question that is not on point to their points, but the question of leasing units versus buying pallet shelters. Do we have a sense of how long these pallet tiny homes actually will hold up? Because we're obviously looking at HHH projects where we're spending a lot of money, but we're spending it partly because it's more permanent. We expect those buildings to be around for many decades. The question is, how long are these going to be around? Can they last for 10 years? Can they last for 15 years? Because we're able to move them around if we lose locations, we're able to move them to new locations that we obtain. And at some point, they're not costing us any money. So I wish we would take a closer look at the long-term cost of these shelters or tiny homes or whatever we want to call them versus the short-term costs of continuing to lease units.
I can give you a quick, I can say that the tiny homes that we've been looking at with pallet shelters, initially they were only willing to offer a 1-year warranty on those units, which would be, we had to negotiate pretty hard to get a 5-year warranty on the units. And I would imagine after 5 years, I don't know, I mean, I've seen the pallet shelters, there's not a lot to them. I don't know how they'd stand up to being moved after a period of time like that. By comparison, just by comparison, the sprung structures that we've been using on the AVH sites have a 30-year warranty on the membrane and a 50-year warranty on the frame. So they are just much, and that's just out of the box. We did not have to negotiate that warranty. So it's a big difference between the durability of different types of these seemingly sort of temporary interventions. As it relates to, and so at least as far as and there's other capital investments that go with establishing these pallet shelters, with the cost to bring in hygiene services and water and sewer and showers and laundry that are associated with what you need to provide a humane environment for people to live in while we are working with them to establish or hopefully move them into a more permanent situation. These are, without those types of interventions, it would be, because we are operating under a housing first model, it would be a pretty unattractive prospect for somebody to necessarily moving into a space where there isn't regular access to running water, for example. So, and that does increase the cost of establishing the sites, and that would be true of any new site were you to move the pallet shelters around.
And so how would that compare cost-wise? How would that compare cost-wise to the other structures that you're talking about long-term? And if they can last for 30 years, how does that compare to 30 years of rentals?
30 years of a rental subsidy. I haven't done that analysis, but we could work on that and work through your office to get you that information.
Yeah, I'm just curious whether the rental versus the pallet versus the other is actually the most cost effective.
Yeah, I think if you also look at these on a per person basis, the temporary structures would serve at least 2 people per bed per year, and so it's not providing a permanent place for people to be, but the idea would be that if you look at it on a per person basis, which is how we've kind of been trying to look at the cost of some of these things, then that also, that's a factor to consider for an interim site. Whereas when you're looking at permanent housing, that resource is only really serving one person, but it's keeping them housed permanently. And that's the trade-off between the interim sites and the permanent sites. If we're looking at addressing the ultimate goal really should be addressing people's homelessness on a permanent basis, so that that we can turn over these beds on an ongoing basis and make them available as they're needed.
Right.
So
I think you're
it's a difficult comparison.
What I'm asking is a cost effectiveness comparison between temporary choices, rapid rehousing versus pallet shelter versus the structures that last longer. What are we paying per person per year? And if one is more cost effective than the other, but we're not getting anything dramatically different out of them, I would think we would be focusing more on whatever gives us more bang for the buck in terms of housing the most people at the least cost.
And if I could just add to Councilman, just to clarify, the rapid rehousing is permanent. It's not a temporary solution. It's intended to be permanent with the subsidy that folks receive tapering off over time and them taking over their rent in like a market rate unit. Just to confirm, it's a little bit different than the ABH shelters or the pallet shelter model.
And the report does discuss the sort of proportion of people in each of the pathways that may be expected to either completely take over their rent. If you look at the recovery housing, sorry, I'm going to get to it. If you look at the recovery housing pathway on page 11 of the report, there's about 1,000 of the 1,500 people who are in that recommended would end up in that pathway are expected to completely taper off a subsidy within 18 months total. And then some of them may need a shallow subsidy after that period of time, but the shallow subsidy is significantly cheaper than the cost to provide an interim housing bed for that person, for example. It'd be up to $530 per month. Which, as I was saying before, the pretty basic operating rate we're looking at under the roadmap of $45 per month is about $1,300, or $45 per night is about $1,300 a month per person.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Price?
Madam President and colleagues, I just appreciate this discussion. I think that underscores the fact that we have to be doing a variety of efforts. And, we talked about some of these tools today. I'm excited about the Streets to Home initiative by ALASA and by HOPIX, an effort to rehouse entire encampments. We've had some success with it and, in the pilot phase, and so I'm pleased that we're going to be continuing forward with that into this program. But I do share the Council President's concern about just allocating $90 million and hope the right thing happens. I think the $30 million allocation is certainly appropriate and a measurable amount that's fair. We know that the project Room Key has had some challenges. We certainly would appreciate a much better communication between LASA and the council offices. I've got a project, still not clear when it's going to be decommissioned. So I think we have a chance to have closer scrutiny and oversight over these funds, and at the same time, make sure they are available for programs that can work. So as I said, I'm supportive of the amendments that the President is making, and I'm excited about the Streets to Home initiative that we'll be carrying out in CD9.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Bonnet?
Thanks, Madam President. Colleagues, just a couple of thoughts. As Mr. Price said, we need a variety of solutions. I actually support every intervention out there, and we need every intervention. We need everything from safe camping on one hand and pallet shelters on that side to permanent supportive housing on the other. But we also need everything in between. If there is, I think, sort of a foundational failure to this region's inability to get a real handle on homelessness. It has been that we have historically invested in really slow, expensive, and rigid solutions. And what we have with the expenditure for LAHSA here for rapid rehousing and shared housing is an opportunity for a solution that is fast, is inexpensive, and that is flexible. And let me talk about the flexibility, and then I'll talk about the speed part. On the flexibility, most of us are now dealing with how do we house the people who are living near our freeways. The people near our freeways and under our freeways are all from all sorts of walks of life and have different levels of acuity. Many of them do not qualify for the criteria that was necessary for Project Room Key. Many of them may never qualify for permanent supportive housing. And in order to address that problem and give us the maximum ability to meet the direction of Judge Carter, we need flexible interventions. And rapid rehousing, shared housing are incredibly flexible interventions. It can be a very short-term thing that helps somebody who has recently fallen on hard times and get them back on their feet completely within just a few months. Or it can be a longer-term thing that is the interim bridge until we get them into permanent supportive housing. And the thing we need most right now, is that level of flexibility. In terms of the speed, I was a bit confused because I heard a couple folks say, we need to be moving faster, we need to be moving faster. And what we're doing is potentially, with very good intention, potentially slowing the expenditure of rapid rehousing or shared housing funds. I want to be clear that this is a faster solution than even the pallet shelters. The pallet shelters, which are very expensive as we're seeing, are going to take time to build and to get the infrastructure. There's no infrastructure costs with rapid rehousing. It's using existing units. There's no infrastructure costs with shared housing. It's putting people in roommate situations in a building. And it's important to note that not only is it a faster solution than those that we have typically used, we have a deadline to spend this money. So we want to be able to spend quickly. We want to be able to meet that deadline so we don't get nailed by the feds who've already been expressing concern about our pace in spending this money. But by saying let's just do 30 and then we'll do a bunch of oversight and process, come back for more, what we're doing is we're requiring contract amendments. Has anybody on this body ever thought that a contract amendment has happened expeditiously in the history of the city of Los Angeles? They're slow, they're frustrating, it goes through multiple levels of approval, and that's what would happen here. And then you've got an agency that, while we're doing that, is going to be ramping down, and then the agencies have to ramp back up again. So I agree with everything that has been said about accountability, and I think there's a way to allocate the money and build in the accountability so that if it's not being spent right, if it isn't working, we can put the brakes on it. But the way that we do oversight that would require contract amendments that would wind up having staffing for these agencies ramping up and ramping down, I think is just is asking for a slower progress than we could otherwise have. I also want to note that in many cases, the difference between the pallet shelter and the rapid rehousing and the shared housing is that those latter interventions, the ones we're talking about here on this item, can be permanent solutions. There's not a very good cost comparison between pallet shelters and bridge housing or shared housing because the pallet shelter, you've got heavy infrastructure costs and it's there, but all that does is get somebody off the street. It doesn't get them housed. It addresses the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. And by doing the shared housing and the rapid rehousing, we're creating a pathway that actually solves the problem. When it works right, it gets people off the street for good, gets them back into a real apartment, gets them back into then a job, and then out of the system completely. And so that's why I'm forcing what I know is for some an uncomfortable conversation with the conflict here, but I do think it's really important for us to be able to spend that money quickly, because it is the intervention that can be done fast, and it is the intervention that can be lasting. So thank you for the consideration. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Bonnet. Mr. Blumenfield?
Great, thank you. And just I have two questions, but just to react to Mr. Bonnet, I want to say I certainly agree with everything you said about rapid rehousing and why it is important and why I think it should be a top priority. But I come to a different conclusion about the need to expend it all at once. I think we are providing in this the authorization for the entirety of the money, but we have, and Ms. Marston, you've been great, and I echo all the positive things that have been said about you, but we have had accountability issues, and by having it in tranches, we can deal a little bit more with those accountability issues. I think it's ridiculous to think they're just going to ramp down, spend the 30 million, ramp all the way down, and then ramp all the way back up. As you get close to the 30 million, you're going to come back to us and ask for an extension of the funding, because we've authorized the 92 million. Everybody sees that it's there. That's where we're working toward. So I don't see this as making that big of a difference in terms of that. Another reaction, and then the two questions I didn't get to ask before. I hear Ms. Marston talking about it as a permanent solution, or permanent housing, and I think that that's great for the folks that it does end their homelessness. But just to be clear to folks who are listening, this rapid rehousing is not creating forever homes for people. It is a short-term funding solution, needed, very much needed, and for the folks who we are transitioning to permanent supportive housing, and many of whom are going from Project Roomkey into this, and then they're going to go to permanent supportive housing. It really is not a permanent solution. It is an interim solution. So there's going to be part of the population where this is truly an interim solution. And so for some people, it is going to be a permanent solution, but it is not permanent housing, which is the North Star for a lot of us. Now, in terms of the other quick questions I wanted to ask, and it relates to the Judge Carter case and specifically, how do the vouchers get distributed in terms of where they go geographically? And how is this going to work with the Judge Carter case in terms of, in theory, if we end up with a district-specific settlement and we have to essentially give credit to a particular district for a housing option, is it going to go to the district where the unhoused person was living on the sidewalk, or is that sort of quote unquote credit going to go to the district that is providing that housing or that rental? And I think we're going to have to figure that out. It's not a comfortable question, but we do need to figure that question out. And I'm particularly worried when you did the first assessment of available units, there were only 31 units in my district technically available on that list. And I know there's a heck of a lot more that we could be doing with these vouchers in my district and in lots of others. So all of that, several questions, but I put them all to one, and I'll throw it to you guys. Thank you.
I'll go first.
Was that a question for Heidi or for Meg?
Both.
Either one who can answer.
Does anybody have an answer from Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, so a couple things I would just flag. On the rapid rehousing piece, I certainly hear what you're saying. Again, the motive here is to get somebody into a market rate unit, and over time they gain the ability to pay for the rent themselves. So it's certainly one of our permanent solutions that sees great success. Permanent supportive housing, of course, is for people who are very sick and need that intensive case management. Yeah, not everybody needs that, which you know well. So, and in terms of who gets credit, where they're housed, or where they're come from, I don't know if the CAO, if you have a thought on that. I think we've had discussions about it too.
So I think that that's why when we put in the reporting requirements for this particular, especially for this particular intervention, we asked for the placements both based on where people were identified and where they were ultimately housed. I believe if we're talking about the targets being the people that are currently homeless in each of your council districts, that's who got housed. And I believe that the credit, for lack of a better word, would go to the person got housed from that district, because they could also be housed outside the city. That's a possibility. And so basically to keep it sort of within the numbers that we've set for ourselves, we should go, and we're basing the targets on where people are currently homeless. We should base the placements on where they were when they were identified for the unit. I would imagine, unless as we start to get more of this data, and we are getting the monthly reports, if that gives us a reason to sort of think about that differently, then we'll have data to base that on. But I would imagine, because the work would be done in each individual district based on the number of people who are homeless in that district, you're going to count placements from that district.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions, members? I just want to go ahead and just say a few words just so that we can end and be able to vote on these two items. We have an amending motion by Mr. Bonin and a substitute motion that I had introduced, and it should have already been circulated. So I'll say a few things. The status quo is simply not working. Just look outside the window and you will see more unhoused folks than ever before. So we're failing, and I've said this over and over again. The only delay that I see is not holding the very agency that, quite frankly, has underperformed in the past. So this substitute motion only calls for true accountability and making sure that this council and the $97 million that we are appropriating are actually being used correctly, and that we're actually holding folks accountable for what they say they're going to do. I don't see any delays in that, and I think, quite frankly, is part of trying to present good government. So what has happened before and what we're currently going through now isn't working. People are not being held accountable, and this substitute motion calls for accountability and for benchmarks so that you can continue to do your work. It doesn't prohibit you from doing that. We just want to make sure that we're holding you accountable and that you know you need to respond to how you're spending the money when it comes to this council. So with that, members, I want to call for the question. I just want a point of clarification by Ms. Rodriguez. I just want to clarify, Ms. Rodriguez, that you are making a friendly amendment and adding that report to the substitute motion that I presented. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and vote on Mr. Bonin's amending motion first.
And
Go ahead
yes,
and call
Madam
the roll.
President, a seconder is needed for the amending motion introduced by Councilmember Bonin.
I'll second it.
Mr. Wu was
Thank
second.
you.
Why don't you read the amendment into the record, Madam Clerk?
And as I understand it, Councilmember Bonin, this is to amend recommendation number 8 in the substitute motion, basically to delete with expenditure authority of $30 million.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Go ahead and call the roll.
Councilmember Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, no.
Bonin,
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino,
No.
Cedillo,
No.
Harris Dawson,
No.
Koretz,
No.
Krikorian,
No.
Lee,
No.
Martinez,
No.
O'Farrell,
No.
Price,
No.
Rodriguez,
No.
Rue,
Yes.
Wesson.
No.
2 ayes and 12 noes. This amendment fails.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote on the substitute motion.
And Madam President, the next vote would be on whether to substitute, and then a subsequent vote would be on the substitute motion itself.
That's right. Thank you. I got ahead of myself. So go ahead and call for the vote on whether to substitute. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin,
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino,
Aye.
Cedillo,
Aye.
Harris Dawson,
Yes.
Koretz,
Aye.
Krikorian,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Martinez,
Aye.
O'Farrell,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Rue.
Aye.
Wesson.
Wesson, aye.
14 ayes, this item will be substituted.
Okay, the item is now before us. Go ahead and call the roll.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo. Councilmember Cedillo on the substitute motion.
Cedillo, aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Rue.
Yes.
Wesson.
Aye.
14 ayes, the substitute motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item 24. I'm not sure, this was also called special by Mr. Bonin. Mr. Bonin, would you like LASA and the CEO to remain present in council chambers?
Yes, thank you.
All right, go ahead. Item number 24.
Thanks. I wanted to thank staff for the work on the report. It combines a couple different motions, Ms. Martinez's motion and my motion, which look at different aspects of Project Roomkey. Mine started out in May, in the middle of a lot of frustration about the lack of success of the program, and was looking at hotels that had received a subsidy from the city of Los Angeles or from the CRA, and otherwise benefited from being on government-owned property or something like that, because it was my feeling that those should be the ones that we are most intently pressuring to participate in this program. Question for the CLA. Part of, frankly, what I had wanted to do in the motion is to call the individual hotels out specifically, so there could be an element of public shaming of those that had benefited from a public largesse and were not stepping up. The report as written mentions that all of the different hotels that have received a subsidy from the city of Los Angeles did not participate and stated various different reasons why. Two just flatly refused, and others stated they didn't participate for other reasons. Do we have a breakdown of that, and is it publicly available as I was asking for in the motion?
We do have information on the explanations of why they were not able to participate in the program or why they did not participate in the program. Due to a variety of privacy issues, we did not release that information into our report, but for the public.
I'm confused by the privacy issues. The hotels that got money from the city or an incentive from the city certainly weren't looking for privacy when they were asking the public for dollars. Why is it a matter of privacy why they chose not to participate in Project Roomkey?
So the hotels in the hotels in Project Roomkey are not walk-up facilities, and so it was important that the program not be set up in a way that somebody could simply just show up at a hotel and look for a room. They needed. It was important that the way the program was structured, that people be assessed for their needs, that they were not exposed to COVID, so that they could maintain the health of the facility. If people are walking up to facilities, then there could be some issues with the safety of the facility.
Oh, I totally get that. I get why we're not listing hotels that participated. We've got a dozen or so hotels that benefited from public investment, and none of them are participating. They all gave different reasons why. There's no walk-up issue there because they're not participating. What I was looking for is why the individual hotels are not participating. Why does that need to remain private?
Yeah, and so in our report, we identified that some of the hotels had provided support to frontline responders, so they were helping in the response as best that they could. So some of the hotels were actually participating in other response to the COVID pandemic. There were other hotels, as we identified in the report, that had business issues that prevented them from participating in the program. And then there were other hotels that were physically not structured in a way that complied with the criteria established by the state, the county, and the city for actually participating in the program. For example, the mayor's office had identified some criteria such as there were a limited number of entrances into the facility so that they could maintain safety of the facility and monitor the safety of the going of the facility. And so when some of these projects were evaluated, they simply could not meet the criteria that were established for participating in the program from a physical standpoint.
I understand that, Mr. Wickham, and when I put in the motion, I think I acknowledged that. We heard from some hotels that said, we'd love to, but we can't for various reasons. And what I was looking for was to be able to know what the reasons were. Are some just refusing to participate? Are some not participating for some reasons that can't be fixed? Are some not participating for reasons that we could change or address or modify the program so that we can get more hotels to participate? So I still wanted to see the specific reasons why various hotels have said no, because I think that's a necessary step for us to be able to navigate how to make a project better, particularly as we look at sort of transitioning into Project Homekey. So I'm going to reiterate my ask for that information as was asked for in the original motion. Second question I had is we have 60,000 or so, well, many more now, but when this program started, 60,000 people who were unhoused. We had estimated Project Roomkey was going to address the needs of 25% of them, 15,000. We never got to 15,000. We got to, at least according to the LA Times tracker updated this morning, 4,221. So we got less than a third of a way of our goal of getting to 25%. And the sense I get is that we're really excited about talking about the 4,200 that we did get in housing, which is great. But I don't know that we've looked enough at the fact that we set a low bar to begin with, and then we didn't come close to that bar. And what lessons are you pointing out for us so that Project Homekey can be more successful? Because to me, Roomkey wasn't successful enough, and we're going to need Homekey to be significantly more successful.
So I think our office evaluated the work that was done by others. So it may be that the CAO would have some better information. It's my understanding that the participants or the people who created the Project Roomkey program actually feel that it was very successful because they started with absolutely nothing. They actually did not even have contact information for the hotels. And the fact that they got as far as they did, some people are pointing to as a success. There were a number of issues that were raised during the negotiations process. And we learned, I believe, from the state contracting process, the county contracting process, and then when the city came in and stepped in to take over Roomkey projects in the city, we've learned better how to structure contracts to get into these kinds of programs more quickly. And then I think going forward, what we'll see is when we are we're considering hotels for any assistance whatsoever, that we need to actually provide some additional criteria in whatever those assistance agreements are to ensure that there's greater information about the requirements to participate when there's an emergency of some sort. So I think we're looking at prospectively going forward that we need better information systems in place so that we know who to contact when we need to bring hotels online for something like this. We have greater accountability and responsibility for when we need people to come on for some of those programs. Again, people who actually operated the program might have better information on that. These are just some of the quick things off the top of my head from my understanding and what I've heard from people who've been running the program.
Well, to either you or the CAO, do we know what worked successfully in other jurisdictions that we need to be doing to make HomeKey more successful?
We're bringing the CEO's office, Meg, to answer your question.
Meg Barclay, City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's
Can you bring
office.
your mic a little
Sorry.
closer because we have a hard time hearing?
Didn't learn my lesson. Yes, Meg Barclay, City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's office. To my knowledge, actually, the city's Project Room Key program has been one of the more successful programs in the state. I'm not aware of any, I think we got up and running faster than most of the others, and that our kind of rate of bringing new rooms online until we got as far as we got was probably steeper than other cities in the state, but I'm not aware of any other practices around. The state was very much involved in the lease-up process of all of these sites in helping to sort of standardize the negotiations and sort of bring a level of like a statewide perspective to that conversation, which I think was very successful, but also created some standardized leases and just characteristics of the programs across the state. So I'm not familiar with any other practices in other cities. Heidi may have more insight into that. That would be more applicable here. I think as far as scale and speed, the city and the county were out in front, statewide.
Thanks. That's important to note. Like I do want to say, I mean, housing 4,200 people that saved 4,200 lives potentially. It's a great thing. I do think though it creates a huge cognitive dissonance with the public when we say we're going to do 15,000 and if we characterize 4,200 as a success. I just think we need to have a more frank, honest conversation with the
I think
public.
there's disconnect between the discussion of like this was the need, like this is our estimate of what the COVID vulnerable population was among unsheltered and sheltered people experiencing homelessness and what we thought we could actually get out of the hotel market. So I think that there was probably a bit of a messaging disconnect early on in the program that's kind of hurting us now. But that's why I think that both the recovery plan that's been proposed by LAHSA and the funding that we discussed under the previous item isn't exclusive to people in hotels. It's people who meet that criteria and are either within one of the hotels or continue to be unhoused.
Yeah, the problem, and I'll end with this, the project I have, having read the report, is, there have been calls, and I'm quite sympathetic to them, to do eminent domain or commandeer hotels. I can't tell if what hobbled the program and prevented us from getting to 15,000 are problems on the government end and the agency end, or if they're problems on the hotel end. If we're doing everything great and we have all these vacant rooms and they're refusing to participate, then that speaks to the need for commandeer or eminent domain. If it's we just ain't capable of delivering, and this is what we can do, then that I think we need to identify so we can figure out what needs to be undone. And I just I didn't get enough of that from this.
Yeah, so I would say though, I was really involved in all of the negotiations with the hotels that the city has occupancy agreements with, and every hotel we went out after, with the exception of one or two, I think, we actually did end up executing occupancy agreements with, and those are some of also the largest hotels within the countywide PRK portfolio. So I think that as this went, I was surprised that we ended up with as many rooms, even just within the city's portfolio alone. We got a lot of rooms in a fairly short period of time, which no one had ever done before. So like, it's a real credit to GSD and their and the city attorney and their openness to this very different program that they had none of us had ever even thought of doing before. So it's a real credit to them.
So you're saying if we had 10,000 more rooms, we'd be able to fill 10,000, we'd be able to fill them?
If we had 10,000 more rooms in hotels and we had the funding, then yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Madam
FEMA would
President.
continue to
Thank you,
reimburse
Mr.
us.
Bonin. We've got Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, Meg, thank you so much for your work on this. And General Services, City Attorney's Office, and CLA, thank you for your report, and LASA for your good work in helping get people in the rooms through Project Roomkey. Question that I have is, in addition, well, actually, I'll just reduce this to two main questions. In the report, it lists hotels in general, and specifically a handful of hotels in the 13th District, which total 610 rooms, and it lists them as being currently under construction and a certain percentage of completion. I'm not sure what that means, and the report doesn't explain that. So if it could be explained to us what currently under construction means and what that percentage toward completion means in the report as it relates to hotels that are complying and interested, or hotels that are just on our list because they fit the criteria. If those questions could be answered, that would be great. And then I have one more.
So the Martinez-Buscaino motion specifically asked for data on current hotel construction activity in the city of Los Angeles. And so the Building and Safety Department investigated or evaluated the data in their database. And so those are numbers of hotel rooms that they identified that have permits that are under construction, and then their estimates of the time it will take for them to complete construction. So
okay, so this is just data with no established connection whatsoever to Project Roomkey?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, but they could be acquired for Project Homekey potentially.
I would expect that a brand new hotel under construction today has a business plan where they expect that they will open and operate as a hotel,
Right.
as opposed to some of the Project Roomkey projects that would be existing properties that we're willing to sell for the Homekey.
Because we're winding down Project Homekey, so it's not like we can then option these hotels that are nearing completion and say, hey, we've got this program. Would you be interested in leasing us your hotel through Project Homekey, because that's being wound down?
The Project Homekey is
Roomkey. Sorry.
Yeah, Roomkey is being wound down, so there won't be any new leases opening up,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, so the other question then is, there is one, and I think I already know the answer to this, but there was a hotel that was issued a certificate of occupancy 2.5 years ago. But again, that's in the same category of just new hotels based on the building and safety list, correct?
Yes.
With no connection whatsoever to Roomkey.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Harris Dawson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wickham, I have a couple questions for you following up on the discussion that you and Mr. Bonin held. I wanted to get a little bit more explanation. It seems to me the proposition is this, and if I'm incorrect in my assessment of it, you could feel free to let me know. The proposition was there are hotels that when they were built or when they were being developed were offered or asked for, in any case, accepted public funds. And the motion asked to say, who are these people? Did they sign up for Roomkey or not? And if they didn't, what was the reason? And it just seemed like there was resistance or concern about making that information public. And I just want to, one, be clear that my assessment is correct, and then two, find out why.
Mr. Harris Dawson, we've got our CLA now. Ms. So?
So, good morning. Oh,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Harris Dawson, we coordinated the information in this report. We spoke with a number of departments and agencies to gather the information. We did include
a list of the hotels that have received incentives. None of them are participating. We were asked not to provide the reasons publicly for individual hotels. We were trying to respect that request of our office. However,
I'm sorry, Ms. Solik. Who requested that you not share that?
So we worked with various offices. That would be with the mayor's office. I believe we also worked with LASA. We worked with, was it General Services? I'm trying to remember all the departments that asked us not to provide that information publicly. I understand that you desire this information, and we are happy to provide you with the information. What you choose to do, we were trying to be respectful of the request to us in terms of not releasing it publicly. A number of the hotels that were listed, there was only a couple that really just declined to participate. A number of the other hotels that are listed here, there were various reasons why they were not. Some of them were because of the configuration of the hotel. Some of them were already participating in other ways, but there really was only 2 of the ones that we identified that had received some incentive from the city, whether it be in the form of property or whether it was an incentive agreement. There was only 2 of them that were reluctant to participate with uncertain reasons.
So if I understand your response correctly, the mayor and/or other departments asked that this information not be shared with the Los Angeles City Council, and you all decided to comply with that.
So we were asked to not provide it publicly. We are happy to provide it directly to you. What you choose to do with it is up to you. But Mr. Harris Dawson, we work with a number of departments, and when we were asked for whatever reason to not share something publicly, we try to phrase it in such a way to provide you with the information, but we also, in knowing that we need to work with departments to provide information, that we're trying to respect that. But if it is your desire to have that information, as I've indicated, we're happy to provide that directly to you, and what you choose to do with it is up to you. But we will not withhold information from you directly, but when we are asked not to provide something publicly, we do try to respect that.
Okay, thank you for that piece of information. I didn't know that that's how you would proceed in a situation where the city council asked for something rather directly, and someone came behind us and asked, pardon me, I have kids on motorbikes in my front yard, in the front of my house. This is the normal way you proceed when the city council asks for something and the mayor or departments ask you to not make it public. It's troubling because one of our major responsibilities, and frankly what we've been talking about most of the morning, is our, again, fiduciary and ethical responsibility to provide oversight on the city's investments. And we just had a long conversation about homeless housing. And, these are city assets that the city council approved, and then they asked a question about them. It's troubling to me as all I'll register, and I'll yield the floor. It's troubling to me that there's a gap between what we ask for and what we get, especially when it's something as basic as information that frankly is public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris Dawson. I do want to follow up on that because we do take our responsibility very seriously to any direction that the council provides to our office. We believe that the information that we provided was responsive to the motion in the sense that we were asked to provide a list of the hotels from the list that are not participating and an explanation the hotels had given for their lack of participation. So I do believe that our report did provide that. The only thing that wasn't provided specifically was the reason that each individual hotel gave and the reason for that individual hotel. So Mr. Harris Dawson, with all due respect, I do feel like that our report was responsive in providing the reasons why hotels did not participate. And I realize that we may agree to disagree here, but I do feel that we were responsive.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonin?
Thank you. I won't belabor the point, Madam President. I just ask if the CLA could transmit a copy of that information to me, Mr. Harris Dawson, and other members of the council today.
We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any other members on the queue, so why don't we go ahead and vote on this item? Madam Clerk, why don't we go ahead and take item 24 and 25 together? Go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you. This is for items 24 and 25. Councilmember Blumenfield?
Blumenfield, aye. Blumenfield, aye.
Thank you. Bonin?
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino?
Aye.
Cedillo?
Cedillo, aye.
Harris Dawson?
Yes.
Koretz? Councilmember Koretz?
He might be still having audio issues. Why don't we come back to him?
Krikorian?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Martinez?
Aye.
O'Farrell?
Aye.
Price?
Aye.
Rodriguez?
Aye.
Rue?
Aye.
Wesson?
Wesson, aye.
And Councilmember Koretz?
Mr. Koretz, can you unmute yourself?
I don't think he can hear.
Mr. Koretz, can you hear us? Okay, let's see if we can. Mr. Koretz?
It's unmute, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Can you cast your vote on item 24 and 25, sir? Mr. Koretz, we're voting on items 24 and 25.
Aye.
Thank you.
14 ayes, these items are adopted.
All right, thank you. On item number 26, members, without objection, there's no action needed on item 26. So let's move on to item 27. This was called, this was an amending motion by Mr. Koretz. Mr. Koretz, do you want to speak on this item?
Yes, I'll speak briefly. There were a number of considerations in both directions on this item. The value would have been a bike lane and a wider sidewalk. The greatest negative is that Melrose Avenue would have been reduced to one lane in either direction, making it impossible for emergency vehicles to pass. And so we expect that there would be circumstances where emergency vehicles would have to respond much more slowly. This is a danger to public safety. And so despite the fact that the city would have been given some extra money to improve the street, the negatives I felt outweighed the positives, and so asked to remove this from the list of grants that we are seeking.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote on item number 27 as amended. Go ahead and call the roll.
Blumenfield?
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin?
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino? Councilmember Buscaino?
Aye.
Cedillo?
Aye.
Harris Dawson?
Yes.
Koretz?
Aye.
Krikorian?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Martinez?
Aye.
O'Farrell?
Aye.
Price?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Rue,
Aye.
Wesson.
Aye.
14 ayes, this item is adopted as amended.
Okay, let's move on. Do we have any verbal motions that have been introduced, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Madam President, we have, the clerk has 7 verbal motions to read into the record.
How many again?
7.
Okay, go ahead, start with the first one.
The first one is introduced by Councilmember Koretz to be referred to the Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. This requests the LADWP to report on the existence of any leaks at any of its power plants or throughout its operations of any greenhouse gas and or toxic emissions. And a seconder?
Second. David Rue.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Rue. The second verbal motion to be referred to the Homelessness and Poverty Committee. This has been co-presented by Council Members Krikorian and O'Farrell and seconded by Council Member Cedillo. This instructs the CAO and the CLA, with input from the Mayor's Office, LASA, and the Housing and Community Investment Department, to develop a unified, streamlined reporting system for all LASA-funded programs and activities to measure contract performance and dollars spent per person per program, and incorporate this data into the enhanced comprehensive homeless strategy report presented to Council and Mayor each quarter.
Second.
And the seconder was Councilmember Cedillo, if that could be confirmed.
Mr. Cedillo, have you seconded that?
Correct. I have
you.
seconded.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. The third verbal motion to be referred to the Information Technology and General Services Committee has been introduced by Councilmember Koretz. This instructs the General Services Department to find that the following property is no longer needed for any city purpose and declare it as city-owned parcel located near Beverly Drive in CD5 as a surplus asset and follow all surplus sale procedures, including notice requirements. And a seconder?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Farrell. Next.
Thank you.
The next motion was introduced by Councilmember Harris Dawson to be referred to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. It is to reinitiate street vacation proceedings for a portion of the T-shaped alley westerly of Figueroa Street between Florence Avenue and 73rd Street. Is there a second?
Second. David Rue.
Second by Mr. Rue.
Thank you. The next motion was introduced by Councilmember Paul Koretz to be referred to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. It is to instruct the city engineer, with the assistance of the Department of Transportation and any other appropriate departments, to report with recommendations to temporarily close the pedestrian tunnel at Selby Avenue and Olympic Boulevard to abate public safety issues. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cedillo. Next.
The next motion was introduced by Councilmember Rodriguez and to be referred to the Transportation Committee. It is a resolution to prohibit the parking of vehicles that are in excess of 22 feet in length or over 7 feet in height during the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. along both sides of Foothill Boulevard from Yarnell Street to Bledsoe Street. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember O'Farrell. The final motion was introduced by Councilmember Monica Rodriguez to be referred to the Transportation Committee. Resolution to prohibit parking of vehicles that are in excess of 22 feet in length or over 7 feet in height during the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. along the following street segments: Montague Street from Glen Oaks Boulevard to San Fernando Road, Norris Avenue from Osborne Street to Montague Street, Bradley Avenue from Montague Street to Dead End, and San Fernando Road from Osborne Street to Branford Street. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cedillo.
Thank you. Those are all the clerk verbal motions.
Thank you, members. Are there any verbal motions? Seeing none. What's before us, Madam Clerk?
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Posted and referred members. Are there any announcements? Mr. Buscaino?
I'm sorry, I do have 2 rezos that I'd like to introduce.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President.
You muted yourself, Mr. Buscaino.
Okay, sorry, I had to pull it up here. Let's see here.
Okay, well, we can
Okay,
see
the
you
first
and we
one,
can
Madam
hear you.
President, members, is going to be for Michael Leonard. Michael Leonard, serving 35 years for the city of Los Angeles. 20 years he's worked for Los Angeles World Airports in the Government Affairs Division. So with that, colleagues, let it be resolved that by the adoption of this resolution, the LA City Council does hereby congratulate and thank Michael Leonard for his 36 years of service with the city of Los Angeles. So best wishes are extended for long, happy, and much-deserved retirement.
There a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Farrell. Next, Mr. Buscaino.
Yes, and my second resolution for Christine Isri, retiring from the city service after 36 years, nearly 20 years, also with the LA World Airports and the Government Affairs Division. So with that, by the adoption of this resolution, the Los Angeles City Council does hereby congratulate and thank Christine Isri for her 36 years of service with the LA World Airports. Best wishes are extended for long, happy, and much-deserved retirement.
Second.
Second by Mr. Koretz. Okay, thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Members, are there any announcements?
And we do have an announcement.
Mr. Buscaino.
Madam President, I
Yes.
apologize, Mr. Buscaino. I do have a resolution as well, if it would be. I can wait until after Mr. Buscaino if you prefer.
No, Mr. Kokorian, go ahead.
Thank you. So the operative clause is, now therefore be it resolved that by the adoption of this resolution, the City of Los Angeles hereby celebrates the 50th anniversary of Valley Community Healthcare and commends it for its unwavering commitment to the well-being of the low-income and medically underserved residents of the San Fernando Valley.
Second.
By Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
President.
Kokorian.
My apologies, Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Kokorian. Mr. Buscaino, back to you.
Thank you, Madam President and members. As you heard me earlier this morning, we are here at KNX 1070 News Radio celebrating a centennial birthday, 100 years, bringing Los Angeles and our entire Southern California region radio news. So in celebration of the 100th anniversary of KNX News Radio, on behalf of the entire City Council and our Council President, Nuri Martinez, we acknowledge KNX's contributions to Los Angeles over the last century. This resolution before you highlights 100 years of history of KNX, but I'd like to commend and recognize the reporters, editors, and directors of KNX who on a daily basis have their finger on the pulse of everything happening in our city every single day. KNX In Depth, hosted by Charles Feldman, Mike Simpson, airs weekdays during the 1 o'clock hour as an extended look and commentary at major local, regional, national news issues. Dick Helton and co-anchor Vicki Moore are the anchor team on weekday mornings with Jennifer York reporting traffic and Randy Cardoon reporting sports. Longtime business editor Frank Motek provides business updates and has the Motek on Money Hour long business recap program, which airs on the weekends and on-demand podcast. Chris Sedens anchors a midday block leading into KNX In Depth. Tom Tran and Desmond Shaw report on traffic during the midday hours. Rob Archer, Emily Valdez, Jim Thornton, and Nathan Roberts anchor weekends. Brian Ping anchors a weekday evening block with Barbara Brook as traffic reporter. Bob Brill and Maggie McKay, Mark Austin Thomas anchor overnights. I've heard them like at 1 in the morning a couple times. In the wee hours, they're on the air too. And my personal favorites, the reporters who we all see around City Hall, John Baird, Claudia Pescuda, Margaret Cordero, my dear friend through my LAPD days, Pete Demetrio, Craig Figner, and who cover all LA government and all of Southern California. You may have heard the news, but Claudia and her She is so good at her job that in 2013, she left her own birthday party to cover the Trayvon Martin protest after the Zimmerman acquittal and got shot by a beanbag. She is one tough Italian, I can tell you that. The entire KNX reporting team is an incredible team here. There's times where I'm on the phone, or you, my colleagues can attest to, we're on the phone with the KNX reporter, and minutes later we hear ourselves on the radio. So their speed and accuracy is amazing considering their turnaround time, Jeff. And also the management team who keeps the station running. Program director who's here with us, Ken Charles, Greg Havel, Debbie Wright, and Dave Singer, who have been on the station for nearly 40 years. Greg is here with us right here. But I can clearly go on and on the list of important stories that KNX has covered. They've covered every single story facing our city on a daily basis. If I was to talk about each story, this presentation would never end. But what I really want to say to all the journalists at KNX is a heartfelt thank you on behalf of a grateful city who you brought to news to us every single day. Thank you for always putting yourselves at ground zero on everything happening in our beloved city. Life in this city would not be the same without all your hard work and professionalism. Los Angeles is lucky to have KNX. The fourth estate is as important, if not more important, than in many times in our nation's history than today. So thank you to KNX for getting to the bottom of stories, always pursuing the truth and doing so with integrity and passion for the news. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you to the entire council. It's an honor actually to be representing 100 years of KNX. When you think about it, what's lasted 100 years? There's not a lot of things that lasted 100 years, although it's not like we have more than 100 employees, which I wasn't really aware of as you were naming those. But having been from Southern California myself, a native, I know how vital and part of the fabric KNX is of this entire community. And I, being the leader of the group, could not be prouder than standing here and accepting this proclamation from the council. So to everybody that has worked at KNX throughout the 100 years, there's a lot of you that are still around, and certainly our current staff with Ken Charles leading us every single day. We appreciate everything. And I'm a fan. Come on in, Ken.
Oh, Ken.
I'm a fan of the station, even though I work here. So I know you are all too. So thank you again very much. We're honored and very fortunate to live in such a great city.
You're here. So thanks again, Madam President and members. Congratulations, KNX. You're the same age as my nonna. We just celebrated 100 years, as you all know, a couple weeks ago. So God bless. Thank you for bringing us the news on behalf of a grateful city. Cheers to KNX. Cent'anni di felicità.
Thank you so much. Hold on for just a second. We've got Mr. Lee that also would like to make some remarks. Mr. Lee?
Councilman Buscaino, I just want to thank you for bringing KNX here. I think almost 30 years ago, was given an opportunity to work as an RNX on the weekends with Frank Motek, Pete Arbogast, David Yesice, Rory Markelson, and Linda Nunez. And it was such an amazing experience. I want to thank you for taking a chance on a young 20-year-old then, but just really proud to be a part of the KNX family and be proud to be a part of the 100 years that you've brought news to this city. So thank you guys.
That's fantastic. Happy birthday to you too then. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any adjourning motions? Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Madam President. Today I'd like to adjourn council in the memory of Barbara Trantafello. Barbara was known to so many of us as simply as Bobby. She was one of the founding members of the West Hills Neighborhood Council and a beloved friend to so many in our community. She passed away on August 25th in Reseda. Bobby employed her bookkeeping skills throughout her 18 years of service to the West Hills Neighborhood Council as a board member, controller, and treasurer. She also served in similar capacities for the Canoga Park Neighborhood Council and the West Valley Playhouse, where she also sold tickets, supervised scripts, and managed stage props. In addition, Bobby was a member of the West Valley Christian Church in West Hills. That was near and dear to her heart. We will miss her quiet tone, her easy grin, her fondness for anything pink, and her willingness to do just about anything she could to help her community grow and prosper. Her loss diminishes us, but just as her memory enriches us. May Bobby rest in peace. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Rue?
Thank you, Madam President. I also want to adjourn today's meeting in the passing of a good friend, Ben Kittay. Ben's passion for fashion photography gave birth to Ben Kittay Studios, which operated for over 40 years in the heart of Hollywood. He was one of the first, he created one of the first cycloramas, which was revolutionary in the television and film industry. His studios earmarked the beginning of the silent film era in 1916 and the second home to Buster Keaton. Ben was passionate about sharing the history of Hollywood with everybody who entered his studio. Ben was a native Angelino and spent his entire life living and working in the city of Los Angeles. A noted philanthropist, Ben hosted presidential fundraisers. He provided housing for homeless individuals in Hollywood and supported local nonprofits who focused on teaching the sport of cycling to inner city youth as a positive outlet. He was instrumental to the sober community as well. He hosted meetings for over 47 years, which changed both his life and the life of so many others. Ben was a caring man and a kind man who focused on his friends and family every day and provided them with unconditional love. He was known for always seeing the best in people and supporting them in becoming the best version of themselves. He is survived by his partner of the past 43 years, Patricia Stimac, and his sisters, Bane Kittay. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. Any other adjourning motions? Seeing none, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.